values are randomized after a certain period of time, then reset to 0.5 to form a square grid with average density. Although each subspace from a 2D tree has 4 vertices to define its boundary, for visualization, however, I don't have to connect all of them clockwise to form a rectangle. And this leads to the next demo by using a different vertices interpretation. There is a function, begin shape, in processing, similar to GL begin OpenGL. It only takes one parameter, but can completely change how the vertices are interpreted and specify the primitives to be created.
So basically, I merely changed one parameter in the previous demo and got this dragon curve-like derivative with a totally different visual texture.
I think this is one of the many charms of processing and other creative programming tools.
And this shifting interpolation mechanism works in 3D as well. You might notice that I changed the animation of the structure a little bit. That is because the elasticity looks pretty hectic in 3D. So I switched to a simple easing style. It doesn't look too bad. December 28th, I started to think about the possibility of using KD tree to represent non-abstract objects. First thing came to mind was to do it through texture map, bounding each cell vertices with a series of UV sets. The test subject I used is one of my favorites, the dog. Seriously, who doesn't love the dog? So to avoid too much texture mapping artifact, I limited the interpolation range on purpose. Plus, you can see that the entire tree is triangulated. By animating the tree, I can make the dog make funny faces. But what about without using the texture? By changing length, weight, density, distribution, etc. It is feasible to use simple geometric shapes like, dots, lines, grid to represent non-abstract objects. The same applies to KD tree. I just need to figure out the best way to create a mapping from the non-abstract object data to KD tree structure parameters. And here are a couple of my experiments. The first experiment is on topography. Each letter is rasterized into a bitmap, and the split of each cell is positioned at the darkest column, a row of pixels within the cell. By switching letters, a new set of interpolation values would be assigned to the tree, triggering the transformation. Same principle can be applied to multiple characters as well. It is not extremely decipherable, but personally I still find it quite intriguing. It has a certain type of futuristic and cyberpunk vibe to it. And by the way, the Chinese characters are Hello World in Chinese, if you're wondering. The second experiment is carried out on my own face. I used OpenCV's face tracking feature to generate a KD tree attached to my facial area. The way how the tree is subdivided is basically the same as the topography experiment. Each cell splits a column or row of pixels that has the lowest brightness. And here is another demo using the pseudo dragon curse variation I talked about earlier, with a more haptic transformation. Recently, I combined both texture wrap and interpolation mapping into a hybrid. Unlike the previous Dolby experiment, I didn't use an image of the object, but a black and white Houghton pattern. By changing the kernel's UV coordinates, I can control both the frequency and spatial filtering of the pattern to better fit an array of pixels. As you can see, the outcome is way more. And here is a fancier version with a different radial Houghton pattern, plus displacement along the z-axis. I want to point out that KD tree doesn't have to subdivide a space in Cartesian coordinate system, and this leads to the next derivative I'm going to show you. KD tree applied on a spherical surface. Apart from being parallel with x, y, or z axis, the splits can also align polar angle, aka theta, or azimuthal angle, aka phi, in the two-dimensional polar coordinate system, with theta ranges from 0 to 180 degrees and phi ranges from 0 to 360 degrees. Same as the previous shifting splits demo, by setting all local interpolation to 0.5, we can get a sphere mesh with evenly distributed vertices. I also played around with different radius displacement, mapping each fragment's interpolation to its visibility, and got some quite interesting results. Later that year, I adapted this demo for a collaborative project with Symmetry Labs, a San Francisco-based studio doing large-scale LED installation. They built a public art installation at the Seaport District in New York City, and I produced some of the visual content for the customized LED. Here is a video of me testing the spherical KD tree. Please be noticed, the LED pixels were not correctly mapped in this video. And this is the final result with calibrated pixel mapping and a diffusion acrylic shell. The shell makes the visual content less crispy, but it is necessary to keep the inner hardware away from the harsh winter of NYC. Next, I'm going to talk about mixing KD tree structure with something seemingly irrelevant. If you're into generative art, you might know a little about vector field. To put it simple, it is a collection of arrows. Each has a certain direction and magnitude. Many digital artists harness its feature by placing tons of particles within the vector field. All particles can be collectively driven by these arrows as forces, leaving a series of beautiful trails in the process. It sounds like something completely different from a KD tree structure, but what if I customize the initial starting points of all particles? And what if I create my own vector field with customized gravity points and bound those points to the tree structure? And here are some of the results from the experiment. I designed a distinct rule for the vacuum field in each tree. As you can see, every demo has its unique vibe and visual texture. But you can still recognize the rectangular contours if you look closely. And then I also applied it to 3D trees. The next experiment is a pretty weird one in this presentation, for I didn't call any primitives, functions, and processing, but I still managed to visualize a pretty legit KV tree structure by using a bunch of program windows. Since processing is based on Java, I can have access to Java's AWT, Abstract Window Toolkit API, which allows me to mess around with the program's GUI elements. For this experiment, I mapped the tree's rectangular cells properties to a group of windows, or more specifically, the window's top left position, width, and height. The color palette is obviously inspired by the Dutch abstract painter Mondrian. There is no specific motivation behind this, though I kind of wonder if the painter was aware of the structural principles behind his own paintings. Moving on to yet another variation. This one is pretty basic. I was doing my casual research into fast algorithm array triangle intersection and putting together some demos to test its performance enhancement. Basically, these experiments used all 6 faces of a cuboid cell in a 3D tree as clipping plans to clip off each cell's containing geometric object. The first row is a grid of diagonal lines and a pile of circular rings, respectively. The second row contains a layer of characters, and technically these characters are broken into tiny line segments, so from an implementation perspective, the second row is actually not that much different from the first. I personally found the geometric contents orientation reset is satisfying to watch. You know, that split second with all fragments restored back to entirety. Next, I'm going to talk about the development of Autotrol 2.0, the piece I'm showcasing here at Sheehan Gallery, Whitman College. It actually has a few predecessors and combined elements in many of the experiments I mentioned earlier. In early October 2017, I started thinking about adding a lively, organic touch to the KV tree. By the way, I'm always fascinated by the microscopic structure of organisms. I still remember the picture in my high school biology textbook, showing the mitosis process of onion root cells. Speaking of which, are visually kind of similar to the autotroph piece I'm going to introduce. But first, a couple of experiments as foothold. In essence, I added 2 internally tangent shapes into each cell, plus round corners for cell boundary. Purling noise was also integrated to produce a natural morphing pattern for the tree, making it almost feels like breathing. These 2D experiments were eventually revised and improved into a formal piece. I named it Autotrol. It was specially built for a digital art platform called Framed. I also made a breakdown video to explain both its features and my process. Again, you might recall some of the experiments I talked about earlier while watching this video.
Another customized version of Autotron is currently on exhibit at Dome Gallery in Taipei. In mid-October 2017, those creature-like characteristics were fused into the 3D version. I think you might start to discover a pattern here of me rehashing my own works. The first animation here demonstrates the skewed slits, and the second one interpolates each cell between its own boundary and its geometric center. And for the third, each cell is replaced by an internally tangent ellipsoid. These further lead to a prototype of Overtron 2.0. And eventually Overtron 2.0. I'll just show an excerpt here since the entire piece lasts for about 7 minutes. But you can check it out later at Sheehan Gallery, right here in this canvas. Okay, the last project I'm going to talk about is Rule 110. It is a generative music video project I collaborated with the British producer Max Cooper. The entire video is one continuous shot showing the gradual evolution of an elementary cellular automaton traveling through a tunnel. And if you pay attention to the tunnel, you will notice that the tunnel wall consists of a long tile of katy trees. I'll just play the video here and you can see for yourself.
All right, so far that's all the exploration originated from that one playful sketch I made in November 2016, if you still recall that. I mean, I know the timeline might be a bit confusing and messed up, but even after I catalog all my experiments based on the visual styles and implementation methods, I still have to do this presentation in media style. So that's pretty tricky, to be honest. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and I hope you all get excited to sail the sea of creative coding, make stuff, push your own boundary. That's it. Thank you so much, and bye.
Fingers crossed. Maybe,
Hey guys.
wow, that was
Hey,
smooth.
how's it going?
Amazing. Woo! Okay, I'm just gonna like turn this sound down a little bit.
Okay,
Kind
sure.
of blasted my ear a little. Okay, so, actually, before I kind of throw this out to the audience for questions, if it's all right, I'm gonna ask you a question first. And that is, as I watched your, actually, can you hear me?
Yes, there's a little bit lag here, but I think it should work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so when I watch your work, I think about the relationship of working and playing. Like sometimes when I'm looking at your programs, it looks like you're playing. Especially like I feel like when I see you sitting at the screen and you're moving your face to make something else move, I've been there. To me, it kind of feels like playing. Can you talk a little bit about the relationship between work and play for you?
I don't think there's really like a huge difference between working and like working with code and playing with code for me, because I mean, personally, I kind of enjoy the process. So I don't know, I kind of see these experiments as like
like a daily relaxation, I don't know.
Thanks. I'm trying to think what the
Oh,
best.
sorry, just give me a second. I think it might be easier for me just to disconnect my VPN because I had to watch the YouTube
Okay.
live stream. So far, I think I can just close the window and just give me a second.
Okay. Well, probably he'll call us back. What we need to figure out is if you have questions, how we relay it. If anyone would like to come up to ask, we could do it that way, or you could just say something and I'll play telephone.
Okay, I'm back.
Hello again. Okay, so are there some questions out there? Like right now, I think what I'm seeing mostly are sort of stunned faces and some
Okay.
smiles and things like that. But I feel like a question will emerge.
Okay.
Yes.
For the video, music video piece, what's the time frame of coding and is it sort of divided up into maybe scenes or is it one long piece?
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me relay.
Okay.
Okay. So the question about the music video piece.
Yeah.
What is the time frame like for developing something like that? And are you working in small pieces, or are you doing it all at once? Is that about right?
Yeah, so first I need to do a lot of little experiments about every little aspect of the whole system that I kind of put them together. And eventually I would put the music and music and visual syncing part. Because when I collaborate with a producer, not only I get the stems of the track, so I can basically do beat detection on each separate stem and export those, do FFT or beat detection and export those data to a text file. Then I can retrieve these data line by line and without worrying about the FPS lag or something. So yeah, that's the typical process of me working on a huge music video project.
So how long did that?
Oh, okay. How long did it take?
The Rule 110 part takes about, I think 2 months, but the process is kind of casual. I just spend maybe 2 to 3 hours per day to work on this project. But sometimes I get a project with an extremely tight schedule, 3 weeks for a 5 minutes music video project, and I've been there before. It's pretty crazy. Yeah, I got it done.
So that was 2 months and a couple of hours a day. Wow. That's useful. Yes?
How long have you been working in processing, and did you use any other programming languages before?
Okay. How long have you been working with processing, and have you used other programming languages before that?
Yes, I used to be a 2D character animator. I think Flash is the starting point when I think I was a 12 when I was in middle school. Then when I just self-taught Flash and doing a little bit coding ActionScript. At that time there was some pretty talented prodigy. I'm not sure. It's kind of a while back ago, but I'm not sure if you guys know Too Advanced. It's actually a studio based in United States, I think. And they used to be Yugo Nakamura. He's a Japanese legend, Flash designer. And I think I started messing around with processing from 2010 or something. So it's about 8 years, but I got a lot of my experience from playing around with ActionScript back in the days. So.
Yes.
It seems like in the keynote video, you showed us a lot of like the successes. I was just wondering about the failures and how that shaped the rest of the work.
Okay. So the next question is about, in the presentation, we're seeing a lot of what looks like successes. What role do failures have to do in this process? Do you get a lot of failures that you didn't show us?
Yeah, definitely. Like a huge amount of frustration. Yeah, that's the typical process of you like debugging. Like sometimes you spend 3 days debugging one simple issue, and eventually you find it's a really stupid one. But it just takes time. So yeah, I didn't show that part because if I was showing the frustration part, the presentation can last hours. So I'm trying to avoid that.
Well, unfortunately, we're running kind of a tight schedule right now.
Oh, it's okay, yeah.
So I really appreciate you waking up so early in the morning to chat with
Yeah,
us.
I feel busy actually.
You are amazingly lucid to be this early in the morning, so thank you very much.
Right?
All right, have a wonderful day. We really enjoyed your work. All right. Okay, here's keeping my fingers crossed that I can reach our next speaker. So that's going to be Google Hangout. Let's see. I'll be Alan Scheller. And let me give him a call. So, and I'm not used to using Hangout, so if anyone in here, is anyone here really used to doing it? So I'm just going to try to give him a video call. We can just have a dance contest. So that we don't have to listen to this the whole time. I'll just kind of hang out and get ready to get a phone call potentially. In the meantime, since this is a community, I want to do a couple of things.
Oh, he's typing.
And he is. Let's hear. Hey, just trying to get things set up. Okay, cool. Okay. Woo. Okay. Well, while that's happening, I want again, thank you for coming out. Feel free to come in a bit. I like as things are getting more kind of, I don't know, intimate here. And I'm really shocked so far that Skype works and now this has the potential of working. Going back to Hans's question earlier about failures, I feel like I've had enough failures, not just in processing, but in so many events where I'm reliant on hardware and software that I just kind of expect it to go wrong. And that might feel like a very paranoid view of the world, but I think that as you get used to it, it's kind of a humorous one too. I think you learn to laugh at yourself when you become this reliant on this sort of stuff. So he's getting things set up. And to be honest, I'm not sure exactly how this is going to be playing out. I know what the talk is about, but I don't know if we're going to be watching a desktop, if we're mostly going to have a sort of talking head, or if we're going to have kind of a more interactive relay. I guess we'll find out soon. I feel like I'm about to learn about Google Hangouts. If this works really well, that means I'm going to use it more. In the meantime, if you want to stretch, please do.
I think he's ready, yeah.
Oh, okay. Got it.
50-minute video call. 5 years.
Hey,
There!
awesome. Okay, so I was telling the audience, I'm not sure exactly how we're gonna play this out in terms of like, I mean, for all I know, we could put the screen to the audience so you could see them, or exactly like.
That might be the most helpful.
Okay, let me see if I can do
Does
that.
it, you want me to just grab your webcam?
Pretty sure, Justin.
Oh, actually,
There it is.
I just heard that we may have a webcam available to make that
Okay.
happen. In the meantime, let's see, what should we chat about before we get our webcam? Let's see, so you're in, is it Spokane or Spokane?
Okay.
Spokane, okay. And is it snowing really hard in Spokane?
It is bright out. I can show you guys real quick. Beautiful. Yeah, it is. It's kind of sunny out right now. We've been cold and drizzly. About 20-mile-an-hour winds all day. So, yeah, any of you guys ever come out to Spokane? That was a beautiful space I love looking at us. Yeah, that's about the day going.
It looks very similar to what Walla looks like. It looks like we're going to get some video feedback real soon. So let's see. At this point, my tech support is going to be trying to hook you up.
Awesome.
Okay, I'm like waiting for the feedback to start. Hey. Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if will he be able to hear it through the mic?
Should be.
We'll try it.
Let's try it out first, it happens, switch back.
Cool, thank you. All right, so before Chatham starts, a very brief introduction. Chatham runs a wonderful artist residency in Spokane, and I'm really excited to hear more about both his residency and his experience working with so many new media artists. So take it away.
Thank you. Just pulling up my presentation real quick. My computer's a little slow at the present moment, but thanks to everybody for coming out today. It's pretty exciting to see so many delightful faces here in the audience. Let me see if I can present this in, yeah, not full screen, that'd be awesome. Yeah, I'm super excited to see all of you, and you're excited for processing, or your willingness to at least come out in frigid cold weather to experience the joy that is processing language. So let me shift screen stuff. Probably get some delightful video feedback, which would be awesome as always. But yeah, I'll be trying to switch back and forth between this and my beautiful face. But maybe pull up some slides. So yeah, I'm here to talk about awesome stuff that you can do with processing. I was going to try to do a full presentation on that. It doesn't work out super great. Chatham. I go by Chatham, and I am here in Spokane. I've been using processing for about been using processing for about 15 years, and I have, in that time, I guess about 10 years. You know, it's been not 15 years, but in that time I've done a lot of projects with Arduino as kind of my biggest background, connecting data processing, doing a lot of large-scale installation pieces, doing a lot of kind of small, quick demo stuff, and then teaching and sharing stuff with residents that
I went to a laboratory. And now with the laboratory, it is a artist residency program I run here in Spokane for interactive artists. And 3 years, 5 years, we brought in about 80 different residents from all over the world, and it's been a super entertaining time, for her to say the least. We've had all sorts of crazy projects, from big room scale installations to storefront pieces to performance art things. Yeah, and it has been quite the spectacle. Yeah, and so here's a picture of our space here in Spokane. I kind of bring all this up. So here's a project that we had from this past summer. We had an artist from Poland coming in doing generative type, generative geometry based on like this, for example, is how coral grows, kind of like little particles that kind of glom onto each other. We do also teach workshops with some of our artists. We did a workshop this past spring with a British artist in residence, endothermic ink, and this is kind of some metal thread that you then just slap a 9-volt on, and it heats up to the inherent resistance in it, and so it heats up, and ink that we printed onto it would then start to change color. Super fun. I bring all this up because we have currently an open call for artists in residence. We would love to see you guys come this summer. We are partnering with an organization here called Window Dressing, where we take empty window space here in downtown and fill them with cool art stuff. So we're looking for proposals for interactive pieces that can be installed in storefronts. Our residency application is open right now. You can come here, you get free living space, free studio space, and a $200 a month stipend to, come make awesome stuff. But, with that out of the way, I am going to talk to you guys about different ways to make stuff in processing cooler. Let's see if I can try and figure out a way to quickly bounce back and forth between these things. Services, no. So I've got about 6 or 7 quick tips, and I'd love to get questions from you guys, get feedback. So tip number 1, go back to screen share. Deconstructing your input and output. So I'm 100% guilty of this all the time, and it's bad, but this right here, this classic ellipse, mouse X, mouse Y, don't do that. And it's, fight for a brief thing, but instead, one thing that you really want to be doing is...
Alan, I'm sorry, Chad, I think we're looking at...
Yeah.
Do you think that we're looking at you or the screen?
The screen right now?
We're looking at you right now.
Oh. I've got the... Thank you. Sorry about that. This one down here. It might be easier for me to figure out what's actually going on.
Okay.
Yes, so back to this. This is a super common menu, just making things super easy, but kind of using, things like mouse X, mouse Y, right in your code. As part of the deconstructing of your input output, you're going to want to instead do things like this. So instead of having it all in one line, you'll have this, creating a separate function for how to actually get your input allows you to, set up this, vector or some other thing that you eventually then use instead of mouse X, mouse Y in your code. The big reason behind that is, number one, it's just kind of good grammar. I'll use that kind of phrase again a couple times, just as, as we code, there are certain kind of conventions that eventually you'll kind of learn and get on. It just kind of makes your code easier to use for other people. But number two, it lets you reuse your code later for other things. So let's say instead of using the mouse, we had a big function that was trying to use Kinect data. I'll use that example a lot in this talk. Say we wanted to track your hands going somewhere. Instead of having all that code just baked into your draw function or some big mess of code, you can just later on just copy paste that chunk code into a new project, and all of a sudden, you have an easy, super great way of getting that connect data without having to totally work through your other code. Similarly, it lets you swap out input methods for testing. So, for instance, go to an example a little bit. Yeah, sorry about this. So example, I do a lot of stuff with Connect, and when I make a project, I'm working actually with a student at a high school here for a project that reacts to your hands, so she wants to make a project that involves volleyball. And so we want to measure and do stuff based on the position of somebody's hands, but by separating out input instead of bundling with the all code, we're able to kind of work on the connect part on some days, and then work on the graphic output part on the other days on the testing, instead of having to work with set up the connect and make sure it's tracking, and step away from the computer, which is a big issue you have when you start working with connect, because you have to change your code and walk back 5-10 feet in order for the connect to actually pick you up, and then you can debug. So instead, if we separate out our input and output, we can actually just change that, get input functions, say take the mouse, and that way we're able to easily test with some fake input that our mouse is giving us instead of Connect. Does that make sense to everybody?
So far, so good.
That process?
Think so.
Awesome. So quick and easy tip number 2. So magic numbers. This is another big thing that you kind of wind up getting into just it's way easy. But so like this function where I'm doing ellipse d.x, d.y, 50/50 to make a 50 pixel by 50 pixel circle. It's also a bad habit. I do it all the time. You're going to try to do it all the time. But you should try and get in the habit of instead separating out the values that you want as kind of constants that exist outside of kind of your main functions. So things like putting things at the top of your code ends up being a super handy place to put them. So instead of ellipse, x, y, 50/50, now I just use circle size. And the reason we do it is, A, you can make changes super easy. So instead of having to dig through a bunch of code, you wind up being able to, just at the top of your file, just change, how big your circle is, and label the circle size instead of some. 2 weeks later, you come to your code and, I've got this 50 in here, and I don't remember what exactly that's doing. Again, number 2, that way, one thing you'll wind up doing is having a bunch of all of these items at the top of your file, and that way you have one convenient place where you can go kind of control a lot of the aspects of the program, like your sketch, making it a lot easier to change disappearance. If you guys do any web programming, this would be very similar to kind of the difference between your CSS and your HTML, where kind of the code you've got below this would be actually describing how you program functions, and then big blocks up here at the top, which kind of give basic input into how your code works. So this is a project I did with a friend recently, based on having to write down kind of typography system. And as a result, so I needed something for leading, for margins, for how much space between paragraphs, and so just being able to have all these functions, have all these values here at the top as constants, makes it super easy to change how everything looks. You see this as well for some of the behavior-related things. So it's time work, randomizer, and delay function were some values that I used in order to make it so that every so often the program was randomizing a word, and this kind of gave a, how long in between each randomization cycle plus another random factor, so it'd be, between 1 and 6 seconds it changes a new word. Yeah, it's super easy to change when they're up here. And again, this is just also another super kind of common grammar coding practice that, the good pattern to get into. One thing you should know is that I use all capital letters for kind of these constant values. That's also a super common pattern that you'll see in a lot of people's code. Certainly not everybody's, but it's definitely kind of the way that a lot of people want to do things like that. Yeah, trick number 3 is going to get a little bit deeper. So I think we should want to step back up here for a bit. So it's not just. So talk a lot about how we wound up using kind of the separation of I/O, and something that's actually really exciting, or something that's actually really been used for my practice, is in addition to separating the input/output in my code, actually, to always separate those out into 2 separate programs even. So instead of having part of my code read in my connect, for instance, and then part of my code, draw stuff based on that connect, I'll actually have an entirely separate program that reads connect data and figures out, what information that I want from it. And then I'll have that data get sent to a separate program that actually goes ahead and does the drawing steps for that. Slides. Yep. So kind of fits into the, originally we had one big draw function, and talk about separating input and output. What you can do as you get more advanced in your coding is to actually create separate classes for your input and output. But yeah, doing separate programs. And there are a couple of reasons for doing this. Number one, making component reuse super easy. So as I was mentioning before, we have the option to copy and paste big blocks of code out of, if you wanted to have your connect reading function. This actually allows you to just have programs that you just open whenever you want to go ahead and read connect data. It also lets you use swap input and output super easy. If a program that's say using connect, and then you want to switch it out to a program that's using say webcam data, or possibly you were having built some sort of physical controller that you were using. If everything's in a separate program, you can actually leave your draw output program running even, and then just open and close different programs with your input. Something else might come in handy is writing things in different languages if you need to. So I do a lot of, or have done a lot of stuff with the Connect in the past, and the Connect, there's a lot more support for the Connect framework if you're actually programming it in C# with Microsoft actually gives a bunch of example code. It's super easy to use. So I've got a bunch of stuff built on that, and then I have it feed data from that C# program into processing, which gets super handy. And I've only played around with it a little bit, but you can definitely, one of the cool things is you can also run parts of your program on separate computers if you need to. So if, for instance, you had a massive installation, you could be running your input side of things, at the entrance of a gallery, have that information then being sent over a network to your new driver of projectors that are on the other side or way up the ceiling, and not have to run a bunch of weird cables, not have to worry about things getting tangled or figuring out how to have your connect be 30 feet away from your central processing block. The way I do this traditionally is using this program or using this protocol called Open Sound Control. OSC, there's libraries for it, pretty much every programming language out there. And processing is the OCP5 library. And so it's a packet-based library with a client-server model. So that means basically sending little chunks of data, and you have to set up a server, which is the program that's sending data. The client that's actually receiving the data. But yeah, you basically two in that. Yeah. So if a program like program A is reading in information and it's sending data to an internet address, and like the address that program B is living at. And program B is sitting there listening for new packets of data in from OSC. Yeah. So basically, when you're using OSC, you need creating packets that'll have an OSC address, have information about the data type that you're sending. So OSC can send strings, you can send floats, you can send integers, but OSC needs to know what actual data you're going to be sending. So basically set up your program to send data to a network address on a port, and then it has its internal OSC address, which can be the big tree structure depending on how complicated you need to add things, and then send data from a chunk to another chunk. So I'm going to pull up an example real quick of processing, where I've already installed the library. Okay. So that's super in-depth setting up, import your library stuff. You'll set up an OSC object that this guy is setting an OSC object to listen to incoming messages on port 12,000. And then also creating somewhere to send things to. So creating a network address that is 127.0.0.1, which is always like the computer itself, and a port number, which again is 12,000. And so this program goes ahead and when you first come off, it creates a new OSC message sent directly to this /test address. It adds some data to that message and then sends the message. And then there's this event handler that says, hey, when I get an OSC message, I'll tell you that I received it. I'll figure out what's kind of in the message and what's actually the content. Run this. So you can see down here, it's got some visualization stuff. I can go ahead and click, and hey, receive a message. Receive a message. So it winds up being super handy. I've used this quite a few times in different installations to send data back and forth between multiple things. For instance, I'll sometimes have a series of Raspberry Pis running processing, and they can all communicate over each other. One thing I've done in the past a lot is so speaking of making things on different languages, I used C# and Visual Studio to create an application that actually reads in the connect data from a bunch of different connects. They're all connected together. And so I don't have any connects plugged in. I did see like connect this in here and here, but this program lets me figure out, actually set up coordinates for how I position this connect in a room, and then it'll actually automatically translate the skeleton data that the connect is seeing into like a global coordinate frame, so I can set up an array of like 4 or 5 connects and track individual through an entire room and get data that makes sense as a person's actual position in a room instead of just in relative position to the connect itself. Then this is actually going to be sending data over OSC over this port. And then so I can have processing or whatever other program you're getting in that data, and then it'll know what to do, or it'll be able to change things based on the connect data that it's seeing. Yeah, and back to some kind of quick tricks. One thing that has been super handy for me is, so a lot of times in connect or in processing, I want to have like a fade out effect. So, over the things will kind of dissolve away, so kind of write a program. Geez. Yeah. But if I wanted to do something where, say, I'm just, drawing a circle, so if you guys have these processes on what this sketch is going to take and draw us to into all the mounts, and it's not clear in the background or anything, it's just going to draw a bunch of overlapping circles. It's going to be kind of fun. But if I want to make those circles kind of fade out slowly to get a trail of that. So an expensive way, and that's what I mean by computationally intensive way, you can use blend or filter. Those are some built-in functions that processing has that tend to take a lot of time and processing power between these cool steps. Difficult way is to learn how to use shaders, P3D or P2D mode. And we graphics programming breaks the shaders to run super fast. My graphics programming is horrible. So, the secret is basically draw a rectangle that has like a faint alpha shape. So, on this sketch, go ahead and then use the push file. Basically gives me saves and loads whatever brushes we've got going on. So when I do this, it creates a separate block. So any fill and draw command that I do here are going to have a different style than anything that happens outside of this. So I'll go ahead and manage. And we are fill. So we're going to have a black fill, but it's only going to have a 50, so 255, so 55 alpha channel. So it's going to be kind of transparent, sort of black. And then I'll just draw a rectangle across the entire screen. This way, every frame we're drawing is basically a filter over it. It looks nice little trails. This is a super handy technique for making things just kind of fade away. So instead of every frame just clearing out the frame, we're just going to have this nice little slow fade. There are some issues with it. We could run an alpha channel, and that doesn't ever work out perfectly. So I just changed those to 20 to make it less transparent, so it'll make the tail longer. But if you leave this too low, you'll wind up not actually ever having enough semi-transparent rectangle on top of your image to actually get things to fully disappear. Similarly, you'll have some issues if you try and have your colors don't work out quite properly. You get some weird ghosting. Again, it's kind of a jank method to do this sort of process. So I'll get kind of nice yellowy green here. And yeah, as you can see, we're never quite fading away. Well, just because the divisions that it's doing when blending all these things don't actually work out to the exact proper value. So there are some limitations to that. But if you're doing stuff with black and white, it is a great quick trick to make things dissolve and disappear. Yeah, are there you guys have any questions so far? Any?
Think we're okay?
Sure. Did you feel the faces? Yeah, so something that I found to be super convenient as well is running your sketch on the Raspberry Pi. So I do a lot of installation-based work, and so it means for every installation I do, I need to figure out some way to have a computer there to be running this stuff. Sometimes that means I just get an old laptop, sometimes it means like Mac Mini, or I've got the old beautiful tiny HP computer thing. Raspberry Pis are super cheap, and as a Raspberry Pi 3, they can run processing. Somebody actually went ahead and built a distribution of processing that even has access to the I/O pins. So it means that you don't even have to necessarily use an Arduino, even though I do all the stuff with Raspberry Pi plus Arduino. But one thing that's really useful for Raspberry Pi and installation type context is that you have a bunch of people who don't know anything about coding or using Raspberry Pi, for instance. And so making something that runs on startup is super important for installation. So you can just, if it goes wrong, you just unplug it, plug it back in. Fortunately, Linux is terrible, and makes this kind of difficult to do sometimes. So I'm going to give you a couple of quick tips if you're not a Linux person on how to work around some of this stuff. It can kind of pain to get things set up. There's going to be a lot of internet searching involved. And Linux kind of likes sort of hiding stuff from you, and I love to use command line. It's not super designed to primarily work from the graphical user interface. On top of that, there are a bunch of different ways to do things, and you'll try something the internet tells you to do, and it won't work, and you have no idea why, and it's very frustrating. So that's me. But tips. So everybody, or not everybody, but lots of people who work in Linux wind up using console-based text editors like Vim or Emacs, and the basic one for Raspberry Pi. And I personally hate the command line. They disgust me. So I had to figure out how to actually get the built-in visual text editor that comes with it. It's not super obvious. Like when you open up a text document on the desktop in Raspberry Pi, it just shows like text editor on the top. The actual program is called LeafPad, but you'll never be able to figure out that without like 20 minutes of Google searching. And another thing is quite a few of the files that you'll want to be editing are system files, and as just a user, you won't actually have access to them, so you'll need to do things with sudo command. So the way to edit system files while you're in the desktop environment is that you open up the terminal window, and you'll need to in the terminal window navigate to whatever direction you want to, and then do sudo leafpad whatever file that you want to edit. So that'll make it a lot way easier. You'll actually be able to save things when you edit them in a nice looking text editor that has a mouse, which is awesome. But yeah, so kind of back to the task at hand. Step one, if you want to have things run on startup on Raspberry Pi, is go ahead and first export your application from processing. So when you finish writing it, the export process, create a camera, each time. Then, in the current installation of Raspberry Pi, if you make a directory in this folder called auto start, you can then add files that are not help files. And if you're located in the auto start directory, they should auto run on when the desktop starts up. All of this is from this smartphone tutorial, and I'll go ahead and share the slides so they can email it out later. But yeah, and then you want to go ahead and edit your desktop file. And basically create an entry to your application with whatever name your script is, and then the important part is the full path to the program that was created, and this way when you restart in the desktop environment, things will actually go ahead and work. That would be kind of my final out of time here. That was me talking about some other stuff. But TeamViewer is another super handy tool that you have access to as an artist doing installation stuff. There are free versions you need to install on Whitman, but it means that you can basically remote into whatever computer that you're using when you're there. So rather than having to drive out 20 minutes to wherever you installed your, driving out 20 minutes wherever you installed your installation, you can actually just from the luxury of your laptop be like, hey, connect to this computer that I is running my processing sketch or my or whatever sketch, and just edit it from there, and yeah, pretty amazing. So those are basically my quick tips for installation art and doing some stuff. Yeah, do you guys have any questions about prospect stuff or laboratory stuff or?
Well, actually, if it's okay, first I'll ask a question of the audience, and then it might go to you. Does everyone here know what a Raspberry Pi is? Like it might be useful to pull up an image or
Sure.
have a Raspberry Pi on hand so you can kind of show people sort of what you're talking about.
Yeah, so Raspberry Pi is a single board computer that the original came out, probably 6 or 8 years ago, made by some folks in Britain. And yeah, it's basically a like $30 board that is a full computer, $35 I guess. They also make like a Raspberry Pi Zero for like $5, which is crazy, but from processing. Can be further development stuff. But yeah, it's basically this ARM-based, kind of smartphone chip-based computer that takes a SD card that is running your Linux, or has all like the Linux and data on it instead of a hard drive. You can plug it into HDMI, USB, Ethernet, and a bunch of pins that you can use to like control motors and other LEDs and stuff like that based on that. Wow. I just totally not sharing. But yeah, and then what it looks like. So yeah, 18 board. Runs about 5 volts on micro USB. It's about a little over credit card size, maybe like 2 credit cards or something. But yeah, $35. Looks like $5 for a SD card. But super convenient. People use them. Big community of people doing stuff. Unfortunately, it involves one thing which I hate. So, gotta be.
Other questions?
Yeah, are there any other questions?
I think we might be itching for some coffee, right? It's been quite a day so far. I know for me. Yeah.
Dave Chapman, Reza, over from Washington.
All right,
Well, good to see you. It's great. I just had a question about the laboratory. Do you have where you have exhibition space in? Is it still a storefront or is it there?
Unfortunately, we lost our storefront. I can probably get it back right now. It's a whole weird thing where, a property management company bought the building to turn it into a weed store, but the daycare like a block away, and so it didn't. And where so they kicked it out, the building's still empty. So, but we kind of scrounged and put around for space to display our work these days. So it's kind of we're scrappy.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Thanks.
What are some of the things that you use to connect work?
So I've done a lot of stuff, so specifically in the storefront installation context. So the laboratory started out as a storefront gallery, and so we were there for about 3 or 4 years. So I did a lot of projection stuff, or I had some projection screens inside the gallery, kind of showing outwards towards the street. And I'd be able to, so like code that I was showing, I'd have a connect in front of kind of each big 6-foot window, and so as people were walking by at the time, the connector would pick up their movements, and then we have stuff on the screen that would track them. I did a lot of stuff with head tracking as well, where if you have a screen and you track the person's head, you can actually adjust a 3D scene to get the proper parallax, and it makes it a really great 3D effect. So I'd have like a kind of a corner, like 2 screens together at 90 degrees. So as you kind of walked around it, it would like look like kind of a fish tank, basically. And so I mean that kind of comes into a really handy technique for interactive design, for kind of art type stuff, with this idea of unintentional interaction. So the thing that's awesome about Connect is that it doesn't require anybody to make a conscious choice to interact with it. That simply Connect automatically picks stuff up. That like there's no button you have to press, it takes away kind of the performance and anxiety of interacting with the piece. Whereas if it's something like a button or a controller that you have to work with, that asks the audience like, hey, become this kind of performer for everybody else who's standing around, make a choice and like to stand out, which is just not an actual human thing to do. Versus it like, boom, all of a sudden you're automatically interacting with it, then it really pulls people into the piece. And by taking away that choice of like, oh, should I interact with this? I don't really feel like putting myself out there. It's like, oh, too bad, you're already interacting with it. And it really puts people into a lot more, a lot more concentration. Cool.
Still there?
Yep.
Okay. Sometimes the link, it can feel like freezing. So
Sure.
sometimes things are dropping in and out a little bit.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, is there an ideal kind of platform or networking solution for handling troubleshooting? Like if you're just like somebody texts you, you have a problem, or if there's a platform where it's kind of hooked into, you were talking about, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but where you can troubleshoot over the network. Is there a platform hooked into that where it can be like, here, I have this problem, and within that same application, you could run the solution?
I haven't done anything that intense. I think a lot of things that you're going to show are going to be like, oh, somebody's like, hey, it's not working. And that's about the degree of intent that you're going to get.
The best
plus
would be unplug it, plug it back in.
Yeah, basically. On the plus side, like, as a person who, creatively codes, as the developer, basically all the problems that they run into, you will have already run into about like 8,000 times as you're writing it. So they're going to give you a tiny bit of information like, oh yeah, I know what's wrong. But yeah, so TeamViewer is basically a total control thing. It'll open up another window and you'll wind up getting like, you'll see the desktop, you'll see everything that's going on there. It's like running the computer just from a different computer. Yeah, so it's a lifesaver. Although, yeah, I haven't used it in a long time. You do need a fairly powerful computer, and I like to live like a block or two away from basically every installation you do these days. I still live downtown here, so it's easier for me to just like walk out my door. Yeah, I don't know.
Would you have trouble remoting into a Pi then, because it's barely a power?
Oh, what's that?
Would you be able to remote into a Pi? Because you have to have it installed on both ends, or would it not be able to run the virtual?
You would not be able to run TeamViewer probably. Being Linux-based, I don't know, you'll have some weird firewall stuff, I think. But a lot of people do wind up doing remote stuff into a Pi, like over the terminal window. There are a lot of options that way, and the Pi is actually going to love it when you come to it over a remote connection because it's Linux. But that's that's stuff that I don't know. I get about if you're a laboratory meeting, do you get a number of people who have like strong like web coding background, and so they're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna run this and create a Node.js server and running all these different things. I'm like, that's you. Cool.
Thank you very much.
Our website is laboratoryspokane.com. We'd love to see some more applications from people kind of in the local area. It's a lot of fun, and if you're ever out here in Spokane, hit us up. We have cool people doing cool stuff all the time. So yeah, thanks for your guys' time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you later. Thanks again. So I think we have some coffee and snacks outside. We'll take a short intermission, and the next segment is all going to be students and faculty from Whitman and WSU. So looking forward to seeing you back. Oh. But let's see, were you going to do it on there? Actually, did you? Yeah, did it on there. Awesome, cool. It is, it's driving. I was sitting up here the whole time and breathing. Your presentations will be kind of a wake up.
Move my password.
You might not be this.
Sorry.
So, I scheduled this. Is that big?
What's that? Year after.
That's.
Yeah, we have a little bit of time. I think it's kind of hard to at this point. Where did that go? So. I don't know. I haven't checked that. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Oh, okay, so that's all.
You know what? We'll make it check.
Ah, okay, sounds good. Yeah.
Switch. Just.
Years ago, stickers on this paper.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure. need another surface down there? What was it? Do we need another surface down there or something? No, I don't think so. Okay.
Is the label moving forward the one you're using? So this is the label that I labeled from our original thing. Are we using system? Okay, because this one isn't programmed. Good. Yeah, I was excited, but it's breaking content is the old friend. Yeah, that makes it worse. That makes it worse. Sorry. Yeah, it's been a little troubleshooting, so the full screen, I achieved it from full screen actually. Not so sure what operations, whether we should. Well, this is just small. Well, either way, I have to get I mean, already in it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that was what we were saying.
Is it a year? Hey, you want to look at the setup?
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot about
Yeah. So, our stuff's like great.
You can remove this once you're done with it. And,
So I'll do a very casual, quick intro to get us rolling again. So the next segment of today's program is actually involving sort of three sets. And we're going to be starting with Mercer Canal, who worked with me a few summers ago. And then we're going to have a presentation by some current computer science students who are working with me now. And then I wanted to kind of like close with some observations about working with these groups and maybe some tips for people that are just getting started. So without further ado, please Mercer Canal.
Thanks for coming back. So, like I said, I work right now. I graduated last year with an art major and a building media studies minor. And I like to say that I kind of accidentally fell into majoring in new genres of stuff, and I'm glad that I did to kind of talk about it, do cool techie art. So my sophomore year, I had an independent study with Justin because I couldn't get into a sculpture class, but also because yeah, I'm really cool. But and then in that independent study, Justin was curious about making a program that could split some text up into one word at a time, could connect a MIDI controller, which is like these keyboard, lots of buttons and knobs and sliders, to that program so you can control different aspects of how the text was reacting to the speed or the size or the font. And so we kind of just started at the very beginning of that in that independent study, kind of at the end, the final phase. And so we decided, well, maybe we should continue this project because this style of collaboration works really well. And so we applied for a Perry grant, got it, which means that next summer I got to be at Whitman for several weeks in the art building and talk about Nietzsche and the organic music videos and work on a lot of code with Justin, so it was super cool. So in my spiel here, I'm going to tell you about our initial goals and questions when we went into this project, and our materials, methods, and how we documented things. So, like I said, we wanted to make this tool that can control the viewer's reading speed, but we're also really interested in kind of ethics of what it means to control how someone is consuming media, or whether they're kind of allowed to see what you're showing them. And you can play with that through the legibility of text through a number of different factors. We also wanted to play with adding human touch, what kind of different, like when a human is controlling something, looks very different than when it's algorithmically generated, because a human can react to something in their environment, or if they're managed, they want to make something much faster, they can do that. And we wanted to make a tool with performative possibilities that was fun to play with, and exploring sort of affect of text as something that can be between a purely visual medium that doesn't necessarily hold meaning and something that is communicative. So in terms of materials, use processing, which is what they has been about, the community centered around. And the mini board that I showed you, the USB device, you can plug in and map different parameters to whatever button you're on. And you can decide what parameter goes to what kind of control based on what feels most natural. Like if you want to sort of date on something, a button would make sense because that's just on or off, so you use a fire or not. We played with a wide range of text examples ranging from various philosophy like Tao and Nietzsche into also comics and groups and a kind of contemporary memo of controversy at the time about the global settings theory of the 80s. And also we used a variety of fonts that we can play with. So I have Wingdings, Micro LED, Monaco, which is inspired by artists. He was
Heavy industry.
Heavy industry, thank you. Nanobrush, so like sort of handwriting brush impact, which Justin's really stuck with later iterations of this. Alphabetica, classic, and Valentino, so the serif thing, and then I can actually scroll through the whole video. So serif font, and you just turn it out, that's not the font. So kind of various fonts that you can play with, very useful meetings each other, makes it really understandable. So much clearer. Yeah, so we have these various fonts where you can either match them to what you're texting about or have a really interesting contrast, like what I was saying. Does this make Nietzsche clearer? That's for you to decide. Or, you know, you can have some kind of techy looking stuff, or is Nietzsche yelling at you? Like, how does this make you feel? Or kind of play with how the text looks, contrast with what you're saying. So in terms of our methods, we're just two techie artists who are trying to do a creative thing, and we don't know how to do it. And so we are collaborating and researching a lot and making these creative choices. I think that have a lot of intention behind our decisions. I think that's one important thing that we hear about behind being an artist in this situation is you're really caring about the sort of emotional impact that these things are doing. You have, yeah, the in any coding, we're really kind of intention, but I think approach things differently as an artist. And in the end, the code that's out here probably doesn't look all that complicated to a computer scientist. Like it's probably it's fewer than 200 lines, including comments. But for us, this was a summer, and we went through a lot of different iterations and came up with something that we were, I think, proud of toward the end. So yeah, it was good for us. Each morning we would start with mapping out the functionalities that we wanted to work on that day, or add meetings once we're kind of right into the swing of things. We would say, okay, today we're going to start and finish this thing. Like we already have a control or X position, we just throw in one for Y position because we don't do that now. Or it could take a week and a half or more to keep returning back to something. Like the font selection was tricky, and you have some interesting glitches where if you call too many fonts and it draws it more time than you want, you get a sort of mishmash of all the fonts together, and of course Justin, who glitch, was interested in that, whereas I was terrified at first, like, oh no, squashed by, like I need to make that go away, but it turned into a branch that we explored in one of the sort of alternative versions of our code. So in terms of planning code, when I was first starting the whole thing, or one individual parameter, I would start by writing myself an outline of a recipe in comments. So these gray bits that are just for the person to read here, doesn't care what you write in there, it's just notes, which are for yourself when you're presenting 2.5 years later, or for yourself when you have a lot of lines of code and you just want to scan the sort of outline you have in there. there, or when you're sharing with somebody online or somebody in your collaborative team. The comments are really useful, always comment your code. And so I would also figure out what variables we would need either for the whole project and think, okay, so we have these different parameters like exposition or like the alpha, the transparency, the text. So you have those kinds of variables. But also as you're implementing these different steps, you'll find other kinds of variables that you need that are invisible, like you'll have a counter when you're going through a paragraph and splitting it into individual words. You need to keep track of how far into the paragraph you are. So you have these kind of invisible variables that hopefully you understand in your documentation on publicprocessing.org. And yeah, so the variables that we end up settling into, I'm just bring over this diagram I made in Illustrator. Yeah, so that's the board. You can see which knobs are matched to which effect. I can kind of run through this after I show you this. Where we have everything from the background opacity and speed to we have a button where you can turn the text red temporarily. And about the saving and displaying staff on in the program. So you can I love these boards because you can just kind of play and you have as many functions as you have buttons and knobs. Okay. Yeah, so we have the page, the speed, and the text box size, so you can make everything really big or really small. And the next text size is making so that you make everything as big as the width will fit. And so it kind of has its own little effect. The font selector sort of seems X and Y position. You can kind of draw text, which I think is one of my favorite things to do. Well, I was supposed to be practicing this speech, I was kind of drawing and turn the album all the way down. It's kind of like an etch-a-sketch. So yeah, it's play. It's not just my professor gave me homework. So play with it. So I think one thing that we didn't do so well, or I didn't do so well, to talk about failures a little bit, was I really should have been better about version control. So you can use a program like GitHub or SourceTree, which kind of a code development management program where it'll keep track of your old versions, or if you made a version that does something you don't plan on including, or if you do plan on including into your main stream, you're not scrambling to go remake your code which you wrote 3 days ago and you overwrote. So, but what I ended up doing, because I tried GitHub and it was hard for me to get into, was I ended up just making folders, the screenshot, and I would just remember and I'd give it a little title. This is one way to do it. I don't recommend it. It's messy. 26 different versions, including Frankenstein these together for a working final version. So, not great for some kids. So, yeah, ideally teams or even individuals would do something like GitHub. I don't know what the CS students are talking about next. I would be curious to talk to them about that. Yeah, so also in our methods, we refer to open processing, which is a repository of other people's processing sketches that they want to share. Lately, it's more geared toward P5.js, less toward processing. So if you're using JavaScript instead of Java. But there's still a lot of good resources on there. And processing.org. So if I need to know how to put an image into my program, just pretty much Google processing image question mark, which is like very big things, and then processing.org is super useful for inserting it and add. The documentation is really, really good. Very useful to someone who didn't know what she was doing. Or if you're also online forum posts where somebody somewhere 2 years ago asked how to do this thing. If you Google your question, somebody has probably asked it before, and then you can borrow the code that some lovely person has put in to answer that question, or you can borrow the code that's on any of these things because we're sharing video with each other. So those we did kind of collage various aspects from other folks' work and our own work into this. And we also talked with a couple of professors to get interdisciplinary perspectives, not just from within the art department. Thank you. And Howard Schuler. So Jen was doing a carry that summer with a student, and so we were talking about how both of our projects had themes of illegibility in them. They're completely different subjects, so it's hung out all that, it's great. And then with Howard Schuler, we set up a projection kind of like this in the gallery out the art building. Just kind of sat on the floor and played with it like I just was doing. And not only did we do a little bit of troubleshooting, it was very helpful in helping us optimize some things, but also we talked about the sort of possibilities of poetry and dance performances and casting shadows. And I didn't expect to do that with a math professor, but this is Whitman, so how cool is that? So then with documentation, we had at first this little save frame function. So when you push the button on the maybe you could save that frame, or you could hold it down and save a number of pictures from it, during this generation video. That was fun. We just had done a drawing where we wanted to document something we thought was cool. And also, I made that mini diagrams as documentation for other people if they want to know what number corresponds with what dial. Oh, but thank you. I made various versions of it. The gift that flashes the title or not. I don't know, kind of fancy little diagrams. And also somebody from, I guess, the communication department, came in and made a video about us that time to show at the end. But that was really fun, kind of solidified. Somebody is here with the camera. We did a thing. Okay, how do I talk about this? I feel like I talk about this better now, even than I would at the time, because it was using an interesting, very tactile thing that we had just made and now kind of cemented into my mind more. And also Justin has used the skeleton of thing that we created here in fireworks, and I believe pass it on to the science students. I don't know how much of our skeleton is left to what you made, but it was a starting place. So that's a sort of iterative content. You don't end up with anything, you just start with, you get to learn and play with old code along the way. So yeah, we started with bare bones stuff from Dan Shipman, some tutorial in our independent studies, and then it turned into a whole internship, and then just lots more work, and it's blossoming and branching. Over time, I've started thinking about more interpretations of the development of cemented. Now it makes me think of mental saturation by media, and political rhetoric, attention span, how your eyes and your mind kind of glaze over when something is you're just not really taking in the information. Maybe late at night you're doing a reading and it looks like this. Like that's what it feels like now, having gone through 2 years of college after that. It also makes me think about dyslexia. We actually had a version where it was a branch we didn't incorporate it back in. It's saved somewhere in those 26 folders, where we would scramble all of the inner letters. And so I know that there's, you see online, oh, most people can read this sentence even though there's, so we were playing with things like that, and how different people have different ways of reading or not. And also Wingding's font. It's so fun. I'm so glad we included it. But in the English department, we encountered an idea last year called asymmetric text. So it is devoid of semantic meaning, or it can be something like it's a mark that looks like text but isn't. So it can be something that is scribbled characters that look like they could be Chinese or it's that English text that's been so destroyed that you can't read anymore. This kind of makes me think about that, and now I have a word for it. The poetry class. You can train our words. Yeah, it keeps evolving. Play with format. To conclude, learning to code can be intimidating. It's gonna be okay. And especially it's hard with the societal narrative that writing code is just for white guys in Silicon Valley, or the tech industry, with access to, like I'm saying on the mission statement for P5 video, anybody can do this with the right access to tools. So promoting that, yeah, anybody can do this. Because if we didn't have people challenging this idea that if you don't already know something, you can't approach it, we never have people who are innovators, never have new painters, new musicians, because if I don't know how to play the piano, if somebody else can do it better than I can, oh, I should never start. No. Go learn piano, it's fine. Go learn processing, you can learn these tools. Yeah, we can learn meditation. If you want to compose music, you can start playing someone else's thing. You can go jazz rhythm off of it. That's what we do, is we're remixing. So if you learn meditation, that means that you can begin to have your own creative voice. Like, are able to study and realize somebody's style, you can try to imitate that. And because processing is so low stakes, you can just, yeah, there's no money involved. Pick it up, and if you fail, it's okay. You either keep going or you spend no money on this. Just a little bit of time, it's okay to drop it too, and then you pick it up later. But I like seeing it as more of a collage than picking up a paintbrush for the first time, because you can make interesting things through other people's pieces instead of just staring at this wood blank canvas. I know it's intimidating. So, yeah, I'm glad to be part of this community, and thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day.
I think we're also going to try to save some room towards the end that we'll bring everybody back on stage if there's Q&A.
Yeah. Great. So we are a team of 4 actually. Our fourth member Ben is with the orchestra and the choir in Boston right now. But I think that he's going to Skype in for us to deliver a little introductory message.
Hi everyone. Thanks for coming to the first processing day at Walla Walla. We are computer science majors at Whitman College, and we're very excited to be sharing our project with you here today. My name is Ben.
I'm George. Cooper.
Nikki.
Before we begin our presentation, can we give a huge shout out to Justin Lincoln for organizing this entire event? Give him a hand.
Thank you, Ben. We're going to go right from there into our presentation of what we have here.
He's okay. He's NASA trained.
So basically, we've made a video manipulation tool. We're using the same MIDI controller that Mercer alluded to previously. We're using this because we found that changing these dials is a lot more satisfying than trying to emulate it with mouse and keyboard. What you're seeing now is a spin on the x-axis. We also have y-axis spin here. And another fun feature we have is the fade. We can make bend sort of fade out here. So I'm changing the fifth knob here, lowering it anti-clockwise. It sort of disappears.
Very ghost-like appearance.
Yeah, you can see Ben is joining us here in spirit instead of ghost humor. Another fun feature we've added is sound reactivity. Let me just turn on some sound here. So right now it's not reactive to the sound at all. Tell me if you can hear me, by the way. So by pressing one button, we can make Ben zoom out a little bit. We can make his X speed sort of sound reactive, and I'll add the Y speed as well. And by pressing another button, we can make the zoom reactive as well. A little chaotic, we'll turn that off. One thing you may notice is on the MIDI controller here, we have some feedback as to how the program currently is interpreting the sound. These buttons, when they're lit up, when the buttons are lit up, that means this individual component is reacting to the sound. We wanted a way to indicate to someone using this tool basically how the program state was without eluding what you're seeing with, let's say, a text box saying, well, this is the feature that's doing this. We wanted what you see on the screen to be pretty much all you want to see. You can also add another sketch. Here's a sketch from Dan Shipman, currently blank. We can make some sound reactive polygons on. Let's turn down the speed a little bit.
Turn that down a little bit.
Yeah. Slow it down a little bit here. So this is Dan Shipman's super shape, and we can make individual features of this sketch sound reactive as well. We can add some period and frequency, and of course fade as well with this one. And so I think this is a little bit of an overview of what we've made so far. I'll bring Ben back here and transfer over to Nick to tell us a little bit about our process.
Yeah, so the idea is that, can you have Ben give one more?
Oh, we can keep Ben going here.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're good.
You can go now to Boston. All right, he's gone.
Yeah, so the idea is that we can switch to, the idea is that we can switch to whatever sketch we want very easily, and we can also easily switch to the text sketch that Mercer was demonstrating, and sort of have this customizable interface as in a live environment. Great, so as Ben talked about, we are computer science majors from the brand new computer science department. We are part of the second graduating class. And the way in which computer science, which is sort of like an engineering discipline, fits into the liberal arts here at Whitman is through these interdisciplinary collaborations, like the CS Art collaboration that we're presenting on today. Like most majors at Whitman, seniors have various assessments and a sort of senior thesis project, which we call our capstone. The capstone, in essence, is the CS majors are split into teams, and each team is assigned a software engineering project with the correspondent client to work with on the project. For example, one project is working with the Blue Mountain Action Council to make a database for the food bank. Another is redesigning the Whitman College campus map, the virtual campus map. These teams meet with their clients in the first few weeks of the fall semester, outline a list of specifications for the project, and deadlines and timelines for them to meet these goals. Our capstone project was a little bit different from these more traditional software engineering projects. And the differences came with our client.
What's our client?
It's a great question, Cooper. Our client is, of course, Justin Lincoln. Yes, so when we met with Justin in the beginning of the fall semester, it wasn't like, all right, I want you to make this website, go, do your thing. It was, he gave us this hard drive with like 50 some of his sketches that he'd been working on over the years and said, all right, let's play with these sketches and let's make something interesting out of it. And for us being like expecting this like more formal project, we were a little bit confused. You know, what are we making? What are we doing? What is the product? We were very focused on what the product is, sort of this engineering mindset. Yeah, so for example, we would meet once a week with Janet Davis, the chair of the CS department, and talk about the timelines and the deadlines for us to complete our capstone project. And then we'd meet with Justin, and we'd play with the sketches, play with processing, and watch YouTube videos of other people's explorations and processing art, and talk about showing our work, which I'm sure you'll talk about. And it was tough at times to balance these two things, but we learned to adapt ourselves into different settings, and we sort of really embraced the process. We reveled in being able to experiment and express ourselves creatively with processing in a way that is atypical of a traditional software engineering project. For example, we would bring a sketch to Justin, and we'd be working with him on it, and there might be us as CS majors, we're used to implementing our code as exactly as possible, the correct way, the right way. And if an error or a bug arises, we would squash the bug and be done with it. But maybe we'd bring our code to Justin and there would be a bug, and he'd say, this isn't a bug, this is a glitch. Glitches are cool. And we'd be like, huh? But we'd explore the different ways in which our interpretations of processing weren't always exact and produced meaningful results. This is sort of a nice reminder that using processing isn't an exact science, and that our communication with this tool isn't always going to produce the exact expected result. And those lapses in that communication and are interesting and worth exploring and worth talking about.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Nikki. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the whole process we had creating the project, the final work that we will be finishing this semester. So at the beginning of last semester, we talked where we got all these sketches from Justin, these small little programs, and those helped us learn how to write in processing. So we played with those for a few weeks and kind of built our skills up a little bit. Then we had to start to decide what we were going to work on and what body of work we were going to create through most of this year for our capstone project. So we thought about maybe we teach other people how to approach processing and create maybe lots of little programs with good tips and tricks and exercises for them. But we finally settled on this idea that a lot of the sketches that Justin had created had similar features in them, and we could try to build a larger program that pulled some of those out so that it was easier to combine them. But when you create a large program, you have to, where you learn very quickly in your first large program that if you don't design it well, then it'll end in disaster because it will be so it'll just be this networking of tightly connected things that will kind of collapse immediately. So this is a visual representation of the design for a program that we worked at. I won't go into depth into how it all works, but it just kind of shows you that we took a lot of time last semester carefully planning out how we were going to implement all our code so that if Justin asked for a big list of changes, as he did at the beginning of the semester, we were ready for those, and this could handle those pretty easily. So we're pretty happy with that. And now we're currently in the stage of implementing these, and it's going pretty well, so we're happy with that. Yeah, for the project, we wanted to, back to the project, we wanted to pull out some of these features. So Justin had more flexibility with how he could build new sketches and combine features in ways that maybe were more complex or would have been taken longer for him to accomplish before. And as you saw with some demonstration that George gave on our prototype, it was pretty quick to switch between video, sketches, and you can see this, but it's easier to put in new sketches, and he doesn't have to really retype the same code as often. So hopefully this will be a nice tool for him and future partners, research assistants, and stuff to play with in the future and allow them to be more creative without maybe having to learn how to code at an advanced level. So yeah, we learned that there's a lot of potential with processing. Justin had a lot of experience with sketches, and that's really what's well known for. And we discovered that there's a lot more potential to create larger programs, which is pretty exciting because you don't need to switch to another language. If you start out with processing as maybe your first language and you're really excited about its potential, you don't have to switch to maybe something else as you I don't know other beginning programming languages as well, but you wouldn't have to switch to something else if you want to create a big program. So that's pretty promising. It's a great reason why it's a good place to start. So a few things we learned this semester, or over the course of this project, we became a lot more comfortable experimenting, as Justin has taught us and kind of forced upon us. We started out just wanting to know where we're going, what we need to do to get there, but he really made us slow down and enjoy the process. And through that, we realized that we gained a lot of motivation and excitement working through the process rather than trying to meet deadlines to get to an end goal. So that's been a great discovery, I think, in our team, is that we really enjoy the work because the work is fun, not really just because we're trying to get somewhere. We also have learned how to communicate better outside of the just kind of CS program. And we think that's a great skill because we're not always going to be able to talk really technically. So it's great to get that experience talking to Justin and some other people in a maybe not as technical or nerdy way as we normally would. So those are some great things. Thank you for your time.
Oh, you're right. So, what I want to talk about today, it's funny, a lot of times when I talk, it surprises me how often I apologize for what I'm saying, even before I say it. And what I want to talk about is about learning, and learning processing specifically. And I'm not going to apologize for it on Processing Community Day. I'm going to really geek out about like learning, and learning is like the most important thing for me about this. Something that comes up a lot when I talk about my approach to other teachers, to students, to assessors who might decide how good or bad a job I'm doing. I'd like to bring up the idea of metacognition, the idea of like thinking about thinking. And one of the things that processing has done for me, as much as it has like taught me to learn some programming principles and think about things in new ways, it really made me think about my own thinking. And over the last, I guess it's been a little over a year now, I have been doing a project that you can find on Instagram. And this is not simply a pitch to get more Instagram followers. On Instagram, I made a project where every day I would make a video that would be about 1 minute and would typically involve processing. And when I did that, at that time, I don't think I would say that I had a creative block. It was just that so much of my energy was focused somewhere else, often in like bureaucratic work, and it was hard to shift gears. But what I discovered was that little goal of like a minute of video a day helped me shift gears. All of a sudden, I felt like I could think about myself as an artist again, and not just as a bureaucrat. And what surprised me, like I originally did this as part of a show that was going to be up for about 3 to 4 months, and no, I guess it was 3 months. And I thought I would just do the project during that period of time. But by the time that show was over, I couldn't stop. Like it had become so ingrained in my habits that it was easier to just keep making them than to stop. And so I'm continuing to do that. I'm continuing to do that in other things too. And I think in programming terms, like some of that is it seems related to iteration, of like taking a thing and changing it a little bit over time. And I think that this is something that we saw quite a bit in Raven's presentation. You see that he's kind of reusing things all the time. He's often going backwards, sort of looping things back. And that can be a very different way of working sometimes than a linear way that's simply saying, okay, here's the goal, let's start walking. I mean, I believe, I guess, philosophically and cognitively, that every time we're moving forward, something in our brain is always looping. We're always going back to something that came earlier. So I don't want to turn this totally into a philosophy lesson, but the kinds of things that you would see on my Instagram, I'll just maybe go to like one of the latest sketches. This is an example of something that when I made this program, it was kind of a mistake. All of these stripes are actually, the color is coming from video, and I was trying to make the video like stretch onto a tube. And it stretched in the wrong way, but I was like, wrong is kind of relative in this situation. Like wrong is very connected to what your initial outcome would be. And so there's this thing that Brian Eno once said about goals. He said that, some people, they set like a target out there, and then they pull back their arrow and try to hit that. And he says that for himself, he would often just fire blindly, and then he'll draw the target around it. And maybe that's the way that I'm working a lot of the time. Over the course of months, sometimes I'll loop back and I'll try different kinds of versions of things. I often use myself as a subject, and I also often use noise. I'm making a lot of sort of I'm working with synthesizers and things like that. My family has sort of exiled me to the basement because they feel very uncomfortable about all the noises that I make. But it's funny, like as I think about my life and as I think about like what I'm starting to become, and I'm becoming potentially someone who as an old person may just be, you know, making strange sounds in their basement. Like that's, I think that can be cool. You know, and you know, I'm gonna switch gears for just a second. I wanted to play an example of like, I didn't want to bring a lot of programs out. Instead, I wanted to just like go to one example of a program and maybe talk about how important that program was. In my mind, it was sort of a link between what I was doing with Mercer and then eventually what I've been doing with the computer science students. So, keeping my fingers crossed. Are you here? Okay. So this is sound reactive. And the code isn't actually that complicated. What I do behind the video is I put a little black square. This is using a kind of fade, like we talked about earlier. But this notion that sound can make it fade was really exciting to me. And I think I might have made this a year or two after I worked with Mercer. And for me, it was kind of a breakthrough. It was all of a sudden when I made it, I felt like a loop between real life and what's happening on the screen was being completed in a way that's very different than if I was like working with a mouse. I got really tired of just working with a mouse and keys. And I don't know, it fits my aesthetic. It's something I'm really into. But it was also sort of transformative in terms of thinking like of working with video in real time and what could be changed in real time. And no, if you can't tell already, I'm kind of improvising right now. I've been thinking about this for a long time. I've probably been thinking about it for years. Sometimes I feel like these things sort of like it's building up and then sometimes it erupts, you know. But I think that as I've learned this programming language, the other thing that I came to value was that whether it's a programming language, whether it's a discipline at school, or any number of things, it can become a kind of excuse for interactions with people. Like, in a way, processing was an excuse for me to, like, work with different sets of students, was an excuse to have this event. And honestly, as I think about that, I start even thinking that, like, oh my gosh, a curriculum? Like the thing that happens in school, that might just be an excuse to have relationships between different people. And, you know, maybe not everyone's gonna think that way, but that's really important to me. The other thing that I've learned as connected with those relationships is that, like, whether it's relationships with people or relationships with tools, that it takes time. I think that when I look at a lot of the culture around me, especially culture that's connected to technology, I think that it's in a hurry. It wants solutions, and it wants solutions right now. And like, if that was every human relationship in my life, I would certainly hide in my room. I think that, you know, whether it's this program, the program that the computer science students have been working on with me, or the program that I worked on with Mercer, that seeing it change over time to me is like something beautiful. And it's something that I don't think I'm just going to like let go of anytime soon. It's very likely that this summer I may continue doing a summer project with a student with that student, we're gonna take what I've learned here and we're gonna pass it on and we're gonna build on it. And like, I don't know, maybe this, I doubt this is ever gonna become something monetized. I doubt it's gonna have, you know, a huge, you know, world-changing impact. But that learning to have a long-term relationship is very important. I think no matter what field you're in, whether you're an artist, whether you're an engineer, technician, think about this whole process. Think about the mistakes you're making and what can be recouped. Think about where it might go, and keep going, even if it's a little bit at a time. And I think I'll stop there. We might be able to bring the other folks back. Perhaps we could sit on the stage or kind of open it up that way. I'm not trying to flash and bite off. Yeah. Okay, so opening things up to you. There's many of us up here. There are there. It's okay though. Let's chat. Any questions for any of us? Yes.
I just want to say, being a visitor to Whitman, it's super exciting to see what the students are doing, especially this computer science crossing with fine arts disciplines and the energy behind that. Just is really happy with Professor Mentor and the spearheading this year. Super excited being from not too far away, just really being a part of this community. So first off, thank you. And second, once this project, the collaborative project, will be complete, do you guys have other ideas of what you want to focus on, processing project in your home, or yeah?
Well, something I'm hoping to get out of this specific project is we're designing in a way where you can swap different inputs in with different sketches, and that like ability to the flexibility of it is really interesting. I'm really curious to see. That's why I asked about the connector earlier. I wanted to know how could a connector fit in with this, or how could like a lead fit in with this, or what different sound inputs or other stimuli could transform the screen, or what that looks like. So I would be interested in continuing to explore that relationship between human interaction onto the processing extension.
Yeah, that's almost exactly what I was going to ask if you had any plans just for like integration of like, hey, we have this kind of random input system. Like how easy that would be to write into current program you have via connect and just throwing out a bunch of float points. Or
exactly. And if the connection is just an array of floating points, then really as long as whatever the input interface is. It was cool seeing that presentation about deconstructing your input. That's sort of where we're coming from also.
One thing that I might bring up too, and I think that this is true like across the board, that the things that we've made, like we're up for sharing them. And like if someone else wants to run with it and do something else, like I guess the only thing I would ask is like, I'd like to know what someone else does with it. And I think that was one reason I was excited about Mercer coming, so that she could see one direction that work is going in.
So I'm Peter. I teach mechanics here in music theory at Walla. You love computer stuff. I'm sorry I missed almost this entire thing. So forgive me if you've already addressed this exhaustively. I wonder what does it feel like to work in processing as opposed to other languages or environments? Are there things? It seems like a lot of you use other creation tools and computers, are there things that you like really enjoy about processing that you wish other languages had, or constructs of other languages that you wish processing had? Any of that?
One thing I love is just how it's visual. And where a lot of coding, you can't really see what's going on. With this, the whole point is to really see what your code is doing, which is something that I really enjoy. But I'm not sure about the actual, like, the way you code it, but I really enjoy how you just visually see what I'm doing.
I've messed around with like C# a little bit. What I like about processing is that you can have an idea and implement it very fast. I don't think there's a lot of overhead for like huge frameworks that need to be loaded, or like if you can run it on Raspberry Pi, then it's a low level system. It's not very expensive. That's one thing I like about it. Like if I want to like visualize something, it's great for that. Like just quickly type something, I can see it. If I want to find out how like the graph is being sorted or something, I can just plug it into processing and see how that happens.
I took computer science briefly in high school, and we tried to do some graphic stuff in C++, and I hated it. Like it was an SSML or something, and either I matured or processing is better, and I hope to say both. But yeah, I think it's much better to just be able to start and say, draw me a rectangle, pretty much, rather than having to set up all this stuff. And of course, with more advanced stuff, there's some setup. You have to figure out your libraries and all that. But you can just say, draw me a canvas that's this big instead of being much more complicated in other interfaces. So that's really satisfying. Yeah, that's my favorite.
When I look at other programming languages, I'm usually looking for like the barriers of entry lowering and lowering. Like I'm not generally looking for added complexity. There's this thing that the artist John Baldessari said about, he was asked, will video ever be able to be an art? And he said, well, you know, I think when artists can use a video camera the way that other artists use a pencil, basically almost without thinking about it, then I think it will be good video art. And so I'm always kind of looking for the programming language that will be the pencil. And at the same time, I'm also very resistant to like, I mean, as much as I don't think, like processing might not be the pencil, but certainly Adobe products don't feel like a pencil to me. I mean, if so, it'd also have to be a pencil that I have to rent out and stuff. Like, I don't know.
Something you also, sorry, Greg, I think you also appreciate the pencil that surprise you a lot.
Yeah.
I actually wanted to ask a related question. Glitches came up earlier. So mostly when you use a pencil, it's ready to hand. It does exactly what you expect it to. There's also this idea of breakdown, that when your tool doesn't do what you expect, you kind of have to step back and think about how your tool works. And that can be really productive because you can come to a new understanding of your tool that leads you in new directions. And I guess I just wondered if you had anything to say about that with respect to processing.
Well, I used to use a metaphor of like, in a typical paintbrush, like if you've ever seen in Fantasia, The Sorcerer's Apprentice, you have like the key with the broom, and the broom to start with is just like a regular broom, and he's using it the regular broom way. But eventually, you know, he gets to the magic broom that starts bringing buckets of water, right? And like for me, there's something about programming and about processing that feels like the magic broom. And maybe unlike the sorcerer, I don't think I'll ever be a sorcerer. I'll just be an apprentice all the time. But like when it gets out of hand, maybe I switch gears and I'm the audience instead. Like that's one of the beautiful things about the whole Sorcerer's Apprentice thing is how everything's crashing, and it wasn't something that Mickey could have predicted. Oh my goodness.
Sorry, I don't mean to like hog this, but you just said there's a thing that I feel like programmers complain about a lot with some languages. PHP Python to some extent, like dynamically typed languages that do the best work whatever you give them, like they're sort of reluctant to crash. And there are other languages that are going to crash if anything looks at all suspicious, because they want to make sure you're producing correct code, and that's like something that some engineers really respect. I wonder if that's totally out of place in an artistic creative language. If you want something that's, rather than crashing, just going to give you some interesting mistakes.
Well, luckily we have some other artists here too, and they might be able to address some of this as well. How are we doing on time? I'm really keeping track. Is it
We're
time?
not over, but
Are we?
as long as people are like willing to hang out.
I'm willing, like,
Because technically Rez's workshop will get back to them.
the workshop might be a little late. Okay.
Do you expect anybody who isn't here to show up at the workshop in time to do?
That's a good question. I guess the only thing we might want to do is send one person ahead, before 4, to catch anyone who might go in there and just tell them, okay, we're running a little late, folks will be coming. And I'm sorry that you missed some of this, but well, you can say that you'll be at the workshop. Cool. So that's okay. Sorry we went a little over, but thanks.
I know why. I think that's you. Is that what's going to
Pretty bad.
I don't know.
It's when you have an event, when you have an event, what's the solution that's required? I think that's the most awkward thing.
So you're that
Yeah, or at least some habits that need to be undone here.
It was like
in the one workshop, there was like,
Yeah.
and then there was a professor that I was hoping that if he brings out anything that I had bring those stories here next year, their parents now.
Yeah, I feel so can't we do that?
So when she goes here,
I think that was the third thing.
and I was not talking about that. But really sure that you're right. I'm all
Yeah.
It's actually kind of weird. So it's a music room. But if you run with them, actually, like it's right in space.
Oh, cool. I just encountered him. Oh. Yeah. The person I came from.
Are we ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, so thank you for having us. I'm glad that the weather cleared so we were able to drive because we thought we were going to do this remotely through like Google Hangout again. But so my presentation should be fairly short so that we can kind of fit everything in. I have been coding for less than a year, so since July of 2018. And so I'm just going to kind of show you my journey to like how I got to here today. So I am an MFA candidate. I'm in my second year of my Master's of Fine Arts at WSU. And a lot of my work before this was performance and video and installation. And then now I'm sort of moving into this video play. So now I'm moving into like new media and interactive and all kind of based around social practice, meaning that I kind of like get involved with like different communities and like that first picture that I had where I was like throwing streamers, that was a performance I did in a house with a small group of people. And then a lot of the stuff that I was doing before this was pretty basic. It was really lo-fi. I was using just really basic tools because I only really have like a Microsoft tablet. I don't even own a Mac. I just use like iPhone stuff. So when I got invited to Anderson Branch, is kind of when it happened. So here's like an example of an iPhone app. I just used like a basic green screen and I did a lot of installation stuff. So using my body as like an experimental thing in space and then also building on performance and installation and how like the viewers are viewing screens and also like using fabrics and sort of like kinetic stuff. So that was kind of my first year and it was really lo-fi. But then when I went to Anderson Branch, I was nominated for this really awesome class and I didn't know what I was getting myself into. It was called Experimental Animation and Code and it was with Casey Reyes. So it's kind of funny because I had no idea what this was. I was just like, this is going to be great for my practice. Like I'm kind of like already on this like path. And so that's where I met Justin. And I had not touched any code ever. Like I said, I was just using really lo-fi stuff. So I was super intimidated and I just like went in with like an open mind. And I didn't know who Casey Reyes was. I didn't even know what processing was. I like showed up and my roommate was like, that's Casey Reyes. It's actually, he's got that, he's like a floating head there. And I was like, who's Casey Reyes? She's like, what? She's like, processing. I was like, what is processing? She's like, what are you doing here? And I was like, I'm an artist, I'm doing stuff. So it was really great. He was super humble and like a really good teacher. So what we did was we learned processing from basics and like each day we had like a different project. It was really kind of fast paced. We spent like 14 hours a day sometimes in that room and everybody was, it was a really great community. If I had a problem with a line or something, I would have like 3 or 4 people around me like, you need to do this, do this. And so we built up to a more complex final project, which was sort of showcased at the end of the week. So that whole week just started from the basics. I didn't even know what a setup and a draw was. Like, I didn't know. And so after that week, I was like really excited. Here's another example of project 2. So we learned how to like basically load an image, load a video, draw ellipses, and then that top white line is actually a line that is being, I think I scrolled this video, this is a screen recording. It's actually being drawn based on a wavelength of the sound. So all of this was like super hard for me, but it was like step-by-step progress, and then eventually I kind of learned it, and a lot of these steps that I learned is what I took back to my own practice. Let's see if I scroll through this. Okay, yeah. So all of this is kind of like what the code looks like, and a lot of this, yeah, so we learned classes and arrays and functions, and so that really helped me apply that to my other kind of practice. And then I have, this is the last one from the, it's kind of slow, I'm not sure what it is. this is the actual final project from the residency, so all of that work was just from the residency. And this piece actually really definitely helped me go into my thesis year, which is what I'm working on now. Because in this project, I set up timers, I set up draw scenes, so I have 3 scenes that I'm drawing. This is only the first scene, and then along with animations, and again, that sound wave at the top is based on the sound of the video. So a lot of this is sort of like what I went back to the start of the year, so that was during the summer, and then when I went back, I was super excited. I told Reza, like I did all these cool things, like I really want to do this for my thesis, and he's like, yeah, let's do it. So again, after he'd seen my work from the first year, using silhouettes, using green screen, we got the Connect in my studio, and I was super excited. And so this is using the Connect, and also there's a video loaded in the background. It's actually a pretty cool video. It's based on cymatics. So if you know cymatics, it's visual sound systems. If you like have like a stand on top of the speaker, it'll kind of like use geometric patterns. And so a lot of like the conceptual stuff is what I use to plug into the visual stuff. So that's why I had that fairy in the beginning. I'm really into metaphysical and magic and supernatural stuff. So this is one of the first sketches I did, and it was really fun. Again, everybody's kind of talking about play, and that's really kind of where my direction went. So this is another sketch I did. So I actually proposed a week-long performance event in WSU, and for the last day on Friday, I was like, we're gonna have a dance party. So I projected this into the gallery. It was like huge, and I set up the Connect, and so this middle box again is actually people in the space. I just put time screen recorded it, and there was like a yoga ball. People had like costumes, and so that was really my first experience realizing that people love to like see themselves on the screen. They like to play, and like that was another step towards my thesis where I wanted to make an interactive kind of like play environment. Before, you know, it was like me as a performer, people were there to see me, I was there to give an experience, and now I want to make an experience for the people, the viewers, to have a performance themselves. So this was really fun, people got really into it. I would like to redo this again, because we just had like a DJ in there, and just played. And then here's another kind of sketch. So I still do a lot of like site-specific stuff. A lot of the stuff is nature or like local videos, and I've been doing this thing where I kind of like, you saw in that last one, where I take these like videos and I have them loop and I have them play, and so that kind of serves as like an artist sketchbook for me, because I was kind of feeling like a little bit bogged down by only reading like code, so a lot of the times I'll end up putting like things that I'm thinking about on the screen, and then I'll run a sketch or something. So that's kind of what led me to my thesis. So here is what I'm working on now. So in less than 2 months, I will be showing my thesis, which I'm super nervous because I still have a lot to build into this program, but we made a couple breakthroughs in Reza just a couple days ago. And so you can see here what I've been able to do is assign a vector using the skeleton tracking. And I said left hand, vector, wind, and so this force of my hand is pushing the clouds up. And so when the viewer steps into a space, they'll be able to interact with that. And then building on this sketch, there's going to be 2 other scenes. So using the depth map of the Connect so that you can actually be where you are, I'm going to be drawing these hot points, which are basically 3D boxes in space. And that will actually change the scene to the next interactive like sort of space for the viewer. So it'll be clouds, and then the next one's going to be like a forest, and then the very last one, which I'm excited about, is using the skeleton tracking to assign objects to certain points of your skeleton, and the viewer is actually going to grow wings and become a fairy. So that's like kind of like going back to that first painting that I had in my slide. It's all based on an experience I had, and again, like I'm really interested in magic and this kind of stuff. So it's really playful and fun. And this is basically some of the code that I have so far. We're making classes, so clouds, and then we're dividing it up into scenes. So draw scene 1, draw scene 2, and then all of those are where we kind of package the interaction, new package, the visuals that are coming, and the backgrounds, which are either videos or stills, and then all of that is still using the Connect as a depth map too in the space. So the gallery is going to be, it's actually a museum, it's going to be about 15 feet wide, and then I'll draw those hot points so that the code progresses towards the end of the sequence, which becomes the area, and that's your experience. So this is basically my last slide. This is where I'm at right now, just a couple days ago. And just got a couple more weeks, but we had like some breakthroughs. But it's basically I'm like pretty proud because all of this was like less than a year ago. I like met Casey Reyes, and now I decided for some crazy reason that's going to be my thesis work. I don't know what I'm doing, so it feels really good because, yeah, again, everybody's kind of talking about how processing has a good community and everybody's really supportive. And I was super intimidated. I thought I couldn't do it, but Reza has been a big help. I can tell that Justin has really helped y'all like have the confidence. So that's definitely the takeaway from this. And you know, future plans definitely like I want to apply to that laboratory. Like I want to get going. Like maybe do 2020 community processing day, all that. So I definitely feel like I got welcomed into the community, even as a visual artist and performer and all that. Yeah, so I think that's all I have. And then Reza's going to come up. He's going to show more student work and also some of his work, I think. But yeah, I don't know if we'll save questions for last or, yeah. Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you.
I'm going to show some more student work first, and then I'll show a bit of my work. So once again, thank you guys so much. Again, thanks to Justin for having us and hosting us here, and also hosting Processing Day. I think it's super exciting. And also I guess that introduction with Bridget and to Justin, and sort of how the community really works. That I'll talk a little bit about how I started in the processing community and how it's sort of it's a sort of a 360-degree loop of how I got into it. So we'll go from there. I just want to briefly talk about some things that are happening at WSU. So I'm let's start the slideshow. So I'm a coordinator of the digital media area at Washington State University in the Fine Arts Department. And I'm also, so I'm the coordinator, I'm also a graduate coordinator. So if anyone's interested in going to grad school, please come talk to me. Again, we run a number of digital media classes, and in that time, we run video classes on basic print-based media. We also run classes. I have one class called Interactive Media. That's the class my favorite class, and that's where we can touch on some of these technologies. Again, my background is in art and technology, and I'll talk a little bit about that when I talk about my work. I'm just going to go through and show you, highlight some works from students in that class, in the Interactive Media class. They're learning about hacking, hardware, software, all in one go. So one semester classes. Then, like I'll be doing a workshop later, a little bit like learning a bit of processing, learning a bit of Arduino, the physical side, and then bridging the two. So just a few things there. We also touch on, again, processing JS. We do stuff like that, so students are interested in doing stuff like that. We're also doing stuff with Google Cardboard, and so we are liberal arts college. In that college, again, painting, drawing, sculpture, ceramics, printmaking, digital. Anything I missed out? I don't want to miss it.
Performance installation.
Performance installation, that's a big part of it too. So we have some BFA students that are actually in painting, and they've got faculty from either area, and so we're working to develop some systems for even the painters to use. So that's kind of exciting. This is an AR-based system using Unity. So we use a lot of different different software, whatever works, and again, I run a fabrication class as well. I'm doing that right now, and so there's some interesting things that happen on the undergraduate level and also at the graduate level. Anywhere in these interactive media classes, in BFA work, they're learning about screen-based interactive technologies and then also how to connect to these screen-based interactive technologies. So in this piece, for example, BFA student Eva, she has rigged, and unfortunately in her video you can't see it, but in that chair, it's sitting a sensor, an Arduino-based sensor, so it triggers then this video to kind of change layers and happen in the reverse. So let me just might be set to the
That might be the settings of the computer.
the HDMI. Okay. Well, we can turn it on. So you can get the idea of some of these interactions, how they work. In the classes, they're also learning about circuitry. So again, my background is also interactive installation. So in that saying, using hardware, how can we combine hardware and software to create kinetic installation or wearables, anything like this. So you can see, again, these are student work testing fans using an Arduino relay system. They're testing fans for this project that they're going to be making. So again, the testing happens in lab, things like that. This is what they made. So again, whatever that is, it's sort of a beehive they put on their head, and these fans blow and there's sound as well. So again, the great thing about this is the creative ways with, again, the merger between different mediums is interesting, but sometimes it's prototypes with all sorts of interesting things. So the beehive, that kind of wearable system. Also, let's see if that's a video. I don't know if the other one's a video, but also we use sound controllers and things like that. Also, some of the projects take on a project called physical algorithms, and I'll talk about physical algorithms a little bit later, but basically creating some form of a system is using P5.js. And this group of students created just a system for installation. And very, very simple, again, generating a random set of coordinates every time you click, and a different color that's corresponding to a color of the string that they have in the space. And then on one side of the wall, you see wall 1, wall 2, basically tells you to draw with string from one wall to the other. So you can kind of see this here, how that's going to work. So she finds the color string, and then she's kind of connecting these strings to create this other physical space. So the idea is really thinking about how these technologies can connect in maybe not so direct ways with space. So anyway, that's obviously, I just was clicking to you guys an example, but it's very slow. We draw one side and the other, right? Again, we also have other crazy installations that happen. This one's called Pick My Nose. And then when you put your hand in your nose, there's a fan and also one of the air fresheners that blows apple pie scent. So the air freshener turns on and it goes on. They designed a kind of painting for this and everything. So again, this connection between physical and some of the digital is really important. We also have visiting artists come. So we've got the Museum of Fine Arts. We also have a visiting artist program within Fine Arts. And that's a little bit of an endowment to be able to bring artists that are working a range of media and then having students kind of work with them for a short period of time. So they might come for a week, for a mini residency, sometimes 2 weeks. In this instance, it was a group called MSHR. And so with my class, the interactive media class, we met with them to ask them what they would like to exhibit in the gallery, one of our galleries. And so we met and established this relationship, how the interactive class could work with the artists to build one of their interactive installations. So in this sense, we have students testing, and you'll get an idea of what it is, but basically MSHR, really interestingly, work with a lot of synths and all sorts of analog-based sound devices. And we said, well, let's try and generate some sensors, create some sensors for one of your installations. And so that was what the class did. So they're just testing, again, with processing, testing 3 sensors. This code is actually available in the processing examples. But they built some of the sensors, and that was the most important thing, making sure they work. And then from there, again, as the building process, so building the sensors, working together. Then, so what MSHR had was they requested these plinths be built, and actually these light sensors in them. So again, the students worked before MSHR arrived. Here, some of the Arduino stuff, setting up an interactive sound installation. So these plinths then have, you can see the sensors that are based in the middle there, those little light sensors, and they're called photoresistors. They're photocells, and something we'll do in the workshop today. But basically, you can use them like a theremin. So it's going to project a range of values, and those values then can be mapped to another application. Like in their case, they were using an interesting app called TX Modular, which is based off SuperCloud, which is a very intensive sound app. So again, TX Modular is like a very raw synth, like digital synth. So that's very interesting. Anyway, so the students would also learn how to map these values, and Chava explained about OSC a little bit. They use OSC communication to connect to the other software. So sometimes in the classes, we were very fortunate to have built that MSHR actually in the middle there. And again, they came and then they worked with the students. And I'm going to try and turn the sound for this because it's pretty interesting.
I need to get out of the presentation program and go to the settings.
There's a select sound output to it.
Look, if you hit one of the sound effects, we hear
there should be a remote on these.
Oh, is there?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay, great.
You're pointed at all.
Ah, nice.
Yeah. Sensors are on the wall.
So volume?
Yeah.
All right, let's hear. Let's get a video up. Let's see how that will work. We'll find. So the values coming from these sensors are actually coming in as different channels that MSHR has created this patch that we patched into and kind of figured out where we can insert the best sort of parameters to use for this installation. So it's pretty exciting to see how things like this in a class can come together and how this visiting. You can see that anyway, so there's a quick example of that. And then, so we're doing AR stuff, so there's kind of things happening with fabrication, so they're fabricating everything in these spaces. This was a pro project called Motel 7, and they basically built a whole room out of fabricated parts and AR components. This is part of the installation, so I'll just show you. So they designed all sorts of different things, like within this room where AR could be used. So this was a set of DVDs with their own kind of parameters and things like that. And then, so the whole thing, the motel was kind of you can see on the bed, there's different things that appear. And so this was used with what's called AR tags, and they're just simple tags on the wall. You can see an example there. So a tag like that can be used actually embedded into a system, and then the application can recognize that, and when you point using an AR system to it, can recognize that tag and actually pull up other images. So there you can kind of see how that works. There is some process, there's some Arduino-based things that are happening here as well. Let's see. Kind of get an idea for how something like this works, and then they'll bring up the system and different areas. We've seen it here before, and then so each group was reserved a certain area. So one a kitchen, one or sort of the bar area, and different sort of stories unfolded in each area. Just also talking about Arduino and these kind of kinetic interactive dioramas that are created. So again, the concept of diorama, creating these mini spaces using kinetics and Arduino and things like that. So again, these systems embed sound players and all sorts of images, sound effects. We need some cats. Was it the first time cats are here today? So you get the idea. And so there's some interactive systems here. Basically, these dioramas. I'll just move on. So other than that, we also have MFA students. Again, this is the old museum. We do have a new Museum of Art in Pullman just opening, and Bridget will be the first graduate student to show in the new museum. This is last year's exhibition. Margaret Gilbertson, she actually fabricated this large arc and relating to her work, adorning it with all sorts of things related to her thesis and her project. So again, the scale, this is all coming up. We have a CNC shop lot that we just got, so we're pretty excited about that, how we incorporate some of the technologies, and the graduate students are super, the first really to get into the technology and figure it out. But the undergrads, again, we're really interested in what's happening there. Technology. This is Jared Warren, so this will interest you guys quite a bit. Now, Jared this is in his last year again, the MFA exhibition terminal degree. Jared actually came background started first year coming in, and his background was drawing and printmaking. He decided, well, halfway through, that he really wanted to create drawing machines, and so he investigated how to create drawing machines. He got into, he actually built his own 3D printer, and he also learned processing Pi, and was able to connect everything together. So using actually machine learning, the neural networks, he had these pieces trained. Now the whole idea of CNNs is you can train, some computer scientists know all about this, but you can actually, using a set of images, you can train a system. And so he went ahead and trained with a number of phrases related to his thesis, and trained the system then to output it the drawing. So there's a couple of steps. The training part happened on PC, then that information that got translated in processing, and then it actually to values, and then it's running from a Raspberry Pi that's a screen, it's running to an Arduino to translate, actually to draw these things. So there's a lot of steps. I mean, it was a kind of very ambitious project, and he pulled it off. So you can see the image sets that are on the screen. So what he used to train this system and the output. So pretty exciting to see how, again, physical digital systems can translate into something actually meaningful and also aesthetically beautiful. So obviously there's a lot of drawing, there's a history of drawing machines, and again, none of this would be possible without a huge DIY community of learners and access and interest and that, and that's what's so amazing about the processing community. So, just showing you. You can see some video. of the way it's working. So again, he created the whole drawing system of how this pen actually, this Sharpie and servo, you can see this thing 3D printed and created the mechanism for this to actually light up the page. And layer from there. So the exhibition was a month long, and so for that duration of this exhibition, these drew at the end. These pieces were finished. So again, there's some duration. So again, the cool thing is embedded in all these systems is processing. You know, is Arduino, is these things, and that's fascinating. I guess this was in the studio because there's some sound, right? So, one more, again, I do a lot of workshops, and actually this is a workshop in Beijing. I just want to talk about this workshop because it had to do with actually creating, using processing for Android to generate some interactive works with processing for mobile. And I work, again, I collaborate, I'll talk about that. One of my collaborators, we've been to Beijing and done a number of workshops, and this is in Capital Beijing, Central Academy of Fine Art Beijing. Again, we start processing day one, learning some, how to create some generative things, and then, people are messing around with the minimal, and then it gets into learning a little bit about using some of the libraries for processing. There's a Katai library you can find, and that actually give you a lot of access for interactivity. So figure out how the mechanisms and things to use for interaction with the phone. See that. Again, just
this is a lot of.
Also hacking. So this was a month-long workshop of 3 weeks, and so the learning processing first, and then learning about Arduino, and then getting into creating some interactive pieces using mobile phones. So this is just again the connection here. I'll talk about what physical algorithms are, but these were designed to relate to how this work can engage with the city and the flow of the city. So you can see. So some connection with the phone to these physical devices. So you can see in their decisions to leave the bird actually out of the cage was their decision. Again, just presentations and sort of how what we were doing for this workshop. There's all sorts of ways of doing this now, and we can approach it in many different ways. This was a little bit lower tech than we use now. We were in China, and connectivity is, again, we had a great connection this morning, but sometimes there's a struggle with the firewall and connecting online. So we kept this very simple, using Arduino and sending just signals to a website and then retrieving those signals. So for this instance, we really used a more simplified version. Some of the students decided to do a little bit more, like see some of the, again, interactions. That's just the group there. Again, so with this, I think doing workshops, again, knowing processing, and with my background there, I try to give back to the community in that ways, doing workshops, and also really think it's important and excited and energized about doing that. So again, so we have MFA work, so please come see Bridget's exhibition, or MFA show. What's the date?
It's April, like 4th or 5th until May 4th or 5th.
Okay, so come up to Pullman, let us know you're there, we can hang out. Okay. Cool. I'll just show you a little bit about my work, and then, well, right, I know we're running out of time here, but. Again, Palouse, some of my inspirations. So experiments with art and technology. So this was something that happened in the 60s with some Fluxus artists and engineers and well-known artists, John Cage, Rauschenberg, really amazing time where there was Bell Laboratories and other institutions gave money to create the first interactions with, well, not the first, but something where they could grab some media attention, I think, at the time. So in this instance, again, my inspiration, I got to see the show in Korea last year when I was giving a talk, a really fascinating exhibition that actually exists and travels to museums. But there was all a series of days and performances with artists, dancers, engineers, computer scientists, and coming together to create all sorts of interactive performances and sculptures. Also, Marcel Duchamp, one of my, again, referring back to Marcel Duchamp, early interactive works where more sculptural, but again, starting to consider this other layer, this fourth or fifth dimension. Again, my background, again, you can see this is titled 2004, so really my background, my first sort of engagement with art and technology would, I think, it's more of a life experience. When I was 9 years old, my mom bought me one of those model rockets that you can get, and I was super eager to connect things as a kid. And so it was my birthday, I got this model rocket, put it all together, it's sitting on the table, and I didn't quite know how to activate it. There was no activator, and you need an activator for this. So while my mom was on the phone talking to a friend, I was trying to figure out how to activate this thing, not thinking about anything, but I gotta have this activated. So I had an old remote control car with a plug and had 2 prongs, and this rocket ended up where the little rocket is. There's 2 prongs for an activator to it. So I'm just okay, clip. And I'm in my living room, my parents' living room, and I plug this thing in. Well, the thing shot up, hit the ceiling, and I mean, lucky I'm alive, hit the ceiling, made a hole in the ceiling, fell on the couch, was still on, burning up the couch. There's smoke all over this space. My mom's on the phone. I'm screaming, right? And so at that point, I don't know what that was. It might be why I kind of got into art and technology, but I think that underlying sort of deep down just wanting to make things connect to each other for no real reason, I think was one of them. This was an early piece. Again, I was really interested in the time Google search. We were interested in bringing images in. I was in grad school, so I started messing around a little bit. How can I get these images to appear in real time on a sphere? Some text. And so that was something, learning some of the old ways of doing things. We don't do it like this anymore. Again, experimenting. I think the glitch came up. I was really interested in that with a sort of a background in my undergrad from video and some performance work, but I started playing around a little bit. This is before processing, so this is using a camera and using a flash, I think, which is interesting to see. And so basically it's bringing in images in real time and then sort of erasing them. And you can see sort of there's some camera movement there. So just experimenting a little bit. I do a variety of interactive installations that in this case was using, again, since 2009, so Bluetooth technologies to activate. So it's a kind of rescale that's activating sort of this movement here, allowing, as you stand up, it sort of measures you up to your carbon footprint or the height of this fuel rises in these tanks. Where I really started thinking about processing in the community was at a place called Media Lab Prado. I'm just going to jump forward a bit because I'm going to talk about the Media Lab. We don't have a lot of time, so I'm just going to talk about it. Yeah, we'll go back here. So, So again, experiments with the Connect, again, this is called Wave Winning. You can see all this stuff on my website, just because we're running out of time, but again, I've done a lot of things with Connect control and physical spaces. I just want to talk about the Media Lab. So in 2010, I was doing a lot of this stuff on my own in Pullman. I felt a little isolated, and we talk about community a lot, and I think it's really important. You know, and I had seen an open call. An open call was called Interactivos, and Interactivos was in Spain at the time. And it was an open call for anybody, a collaborator from any field, to go and participate on a series of projects. And I thought, well, this is fantastic. I have all this stuff. I want to connect. I'm really interested in sort of figuring out how I can contribute to the community this way. Interactivos, it happens every other year. They haven't had one in a little bit, but they have one every other year. And it's a time where groups are formed. You can propose actually a project, and then there's a call for a proposal for collaborators. So the first time I went, I was a collaborator, so I put in my resume and it said, "You're accepted." So I said, "Oh, I'm on my way." Anyway, this wasn't the whole Media Lab product. This Media Lab sort of defines itself as a space for the production, research, and dissemination of digital culture, confluence between art, science, technology, and society. And in contrast to the traditional exhibition model, most production is a real process, it's planning, configure, spectator, adapter. Basically, it's a place where we can make, and there's engagement, there's energy, and a whole lot of coffee. So Media Lab has one thing about the Media Lab that's really interesting. Media Lab on its outside has a big, this is actually a screen. And in fact, early, when this was implemented, I believe it was Casey that went to program the first stuff on it to get it working quickly. But anyway, this screen was really fascinating. It's in this area where it's in a neighborhood, and it's in this large screen. And so one of the things that happened on the screen a little bit later, not the first project, was another workshop on kind of creating games for public spaces. So this was the first iteration with a group of artists and sound artists and sculpture and painters, and there was all sorts of people there. We built this thing, again, the original idea was from Pablo, but again, in the end, it became this really interesting collaborative project. So again, so you can see a wall that as the skaters are moving, it's sort of tracking and it's creating this difference in coloring that's happening. Also, there's contact. This is just a visualization. That's not how let's see how this works. So there's contact microphones in different places. So when the skaters hit, that's relating to what's happening with sound, as well as the skaters are moving, they're sort of tracking what's happening. So I'll just leave that there for a second. Move on. So the screen, again, pretty amazing. So two of the people I met at Media Lab that actually worked there, and I've actually done some collaborative projects with them, Sergio Galan and Victor Diaz. They are really amazing artists and programmers. What they actually created for the Media Lab was a thing called Code the Square. So this is a software that works through, at the time, just a little bit before processing P5. But they ported using Node, another software for creating this. Actually created an interface that people from all over the world could go in and code something for the square. Really phenomenal. And you could take advantage of the camera that was on the roof. So it could do blob tracking. That means that basically you can see on the left hand, there's two guys holding lights. There's a test example, a video that plays that you can, as you're writing your code, you can test to see how this video is actually, how it's interacting with your code. So they put on a series of exhibitions. One was called Code the Square. Then they created this whole interface. There was a lot of other things you could do. You could connect with your phone. And anyway, so you could just run your code. And so this was an example of something that I did with them. It was, well, I did it on my own when they asked me to do something. So I did something called Unite. Basically, if there's two people, it'll connect them. And if there's multiple, it'll connect multiple people. So you can see, that in space. And so the way they were running this was super cool. Was that they, again, it's like it's a night. So you would have everybody's code being run. So they each have like 10 minutes or something to have interaction in the square. So different ways that the screen is being used with processing. So this is, I'm hoping that they open it up again. I'm not sure the result because I know at some point the server would go down and it was only available when they turned it on. But pretty exciting because it's actually connecting to a number of computers and this huge screen. And then they sent video of people's projects. So they listed. And again, it was really interesting for me because it was also an interesting camera-based interaction. These blogs that happen. Again, just changing how we think about coding. And hey, we can code this physical, like this screen on the side of this building, and you don't even have to go there. So pretty awesome. And so I credit those guys for figuring that out. I did a project, again, we took Sonic Skate to Brazil, and with Sergio and Pablo, we did another iteration where they asked us to actually design the ramps. And there were some architects as well, so we had to go back and forth with them. But it was this huge production. And the idea, again, let me iterate, the most interesting thing, and the most interesting thing I can really talk about is first one, access. So when the DIY culture hit, I was sort of already doing things, and the DIY culture wasn't here. So one thing is learning online. Earlier on, I was looking at artists, with using different things like Basic Stamp and Harry Hoberman, and thinking about whatever code they put online at that point to learn from. Access, again, a lot of code. Again, also, how do you engage with the community? And so the physical projects, that move off the screen, and on the screen as well, but off the screen, we just get a different type of engagement where it's super exciting to see. And so one thing was to engage this huge screen there. So this is in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, and Avenida Paulista, was to connect this ramp and the skaters, just the local skaters, with this screen and just create another dialogue. So we took Sonic Skate to kind of another level. You can kind of see how we had a camera that was up on a pole, telephone pole pointing down, and we mapped how skaters would engage. And then there's certain points that would, there's nothing here, but there's certain points, that's Pablo and Sergio, certain points where, if they hit the ramp, all these things that can kind of engage. So pretty interesting. I'll just show you a quick excerpt of that. Again, on the same system of contact microphones. There's the camera, so how it's tracking. So what's happening is there's graphics that are happening on this wall at the same time. So what's happening on there, the the graph we're actually sending to that screen. There's graphics that are happening in response to where the skaters are. Now this ramp was super dangerous. There's another screen just kind of showing the visualization down below. This ramp was really dangerous. In fact, they designed it with these metal sidings and not something that we didn't have any control over because we were working with architects. So I'll just move on here. That is in a book called Curators that curated that Marilia and Tanya Top. There's a book called What Urban Media Art Can Do, and this was in connection with another international thing called Connecting Cities, and that really brought screens, cities with screens around the world to connect with each other. So that's really Connecting Cities sponsored the first event, the one that was in Madrid, and then usually the curators. Again, that workshop, that was a workshop that we gave in China with Max, and so again, using processing and everything that happened. That's an image of one of our installations. That was also being demonstrated. So I just want to talk a little bit about this and then I'll stop. So the next series of work really started by this idea of a physical algorithm, and sort of again my interest in the Fluxus movement and the Situationists, how they used simple sets of instructions to create artwork, is an algorithm in itself. And just as you can read one of Shifton's books, he talks about how basically breaking down an algorithm into making bread. But again, this idea, really interesting, and Fluxus thought about it in different ways to create ways of getting people to work together and collaborate to create these happenings and performances and things like that. So this idea of physical algorithm, again, a series of steps to generate creative content and output. And that really started us thinking of another body of work that was related to located media basic projects using processing P5 Node.js, connecting with Node.js and then creating these physical manifestations. So again, Alison Knowles, you may know this work, making a salad. The idea is anyone can participate and make a sandwich, right, or a salad. So this idea really translates now to our DIY community. We have this level of access that we really engage with and learn many things, and we can all contribute. So at the level, again, whether it be like Media Lab Proud, they accept anyone as a collaborator. You don't have to have a background in code at all. These types of things, this level of access is super important. Again, how I go through making artwork and thinking about how I'm using these DIY technologies. And trying to get back in certain ways. I'm not as well versed in code as others are. I really appreciated seeing the coders earlier and some of those presentations and how they're very much into it. I learned kind of on my own, but my fascination really was I just kept at it. I started with video undergrad, and I was just at that time that was what it was, and then I had some chances to work with some systems that were closed, which means that these systems were in rooms where only a few people could access them. And I had an ability there through what was happening in my college to learn a little bit about software, creative coding software. At the time it was called Director, which was way back in the day. But the idea is now it's this was for a project that Victor and I were engaged with in Egypt. They invited us to this Diegy festival, and the ideas were to create some work. And so this started with this project, and then I'm not going to go through all the different projects I've done, but this is sort of the start of where we started thinking about, okay, we're invited to come and present in a place with how we're sort of mobile as it is. Can we create a project in, say, 15 days? Can we do this? We go to a place, learn about a certain environment or city, and then make the work. And so this was the first of that. So we started taking this idea of physical algorithm as well, where we wrote out sort of how we would find nonlinear ways of exploring the city, sort of like a situationist, and then we created some code, and then we generated some of that was generated for that language. And really, this was a test to see can we explore a place we didn't know nonlinearly, or would nonlinear just be nonlinear, and we don't know anything anyway, so how's that going to go? So we did a series of these physical algorithms. One was in front of the pyramids, where it was just very basic, where we ran across, we actually timed ourselves running around the pyramids, and then created, using GPS, we kind of mapped that in part of our installation. So this is using Node.js and processing. At the time, this is before P5, so just, well, maybe not just before, but it was where you could port the library processing into Node in addition to the JS library, but before P5, the JS library. So Victor, again, he was really, again, he was really instrumental in some of this. So again, working with people, your levels may be at different levels, and these collaborative projects sometimes, what's required is a number of people with a variety of skills to come together to make these projects happen. And so working collaboratively, also you're learning a lot. So when I worked with Victor, I learned a lot about how some of these functions went. So when I was on my own, I could do them on my own. So this is the GPS coordinates. We thought we could kind of run around the pyramids in a square, but what ended up was this sort of, where there was barriers and all sorts of things happening. Anyway, this is, just quickly, so that was projected on the wall, and then this was our physical algorithm, where you would take a taxi, and while you had some money, very little actually, 100 is actually not a lot, and you would basically, with this app, you would check the app and give a random direction, random amount of money, and you're supposed to show it to the taxi cab driver, and it's in Egyptian because someone's written that, and it says northeast, west, south. So we think about vectors at the time quite a bit. But anyway, then when basically it was like, just get the taxi cab driver to take you somewhere, and the taxi cab driver was like, what are you guys doing? You kind of get the idea for how that works. So you shape the app, and it gives you a random northeast, west, south. And then there's the cabbie, and you guys like, what? Because what we found out is northeast, west, south isn't how they navigate the city. So right there, we were sort of left with, but we figured it out. And then they took us all around the city using this app. We got to see the city. And so these became kind of these ways of using video, interactivity, and to navigate the cities. And then what we would do is create a system that would express this. In this case, there was no physical system, but later iterations, there became these physical systems. So we ran around the city and we sampled food according to our algorithm, and then we moved on. So this is the way we incorporated code into these pieces. Just moving on quickly. We also did something in Dubai. We were invited to an Isaiah festival, so we did something related to that, and then we had a physical output, which was these ferry drones that would launch. You can check that out on the website. Or some interactive projects. Rhythm's another one. So this was in Beijing, China, where we navigated the city in a very similar way, but our physical output was a machine. I'll show you that. That's Max Kestenstein level collaborators. This was our system we were working on. So this is where data would flow in. This is moving as a big 2D access, so that's actually dropping in rice. So depending on where you are in the city, these systems are connected, located through located. One other one we did in this is in Colombia for Isaiah 2016. And again, it had a physical, so this is using P5.js, and that's connecting to these salt-limiting valves that are releasing coffee. So this is called Columbia Video's coffee drip. So we went there and we actually
part of the way what we do is we go to this town, the city, and figure out how we can make them work. And we make them work in the exhibit. Highly stressful, maybe 10 or 15 days we're there. So we're sourcing materials, but one of the amazing things about that is that we learn about the city in another way, just making things. And also, we're so surprised that they're letting us do it because they're, again, culminating an exhibition. So in this sense, what we did, we worked with a baker. So we were in a bakery making these large molds of sugar. So those are sugar, and then there's coffee in there. And then as we move through the city, we are interacting with people and asking them to sample coffee beans. And then depending on the 5 coffee beans we sample, they're related to each bucket here, and then they're drip onto it. So by the end of that exhibition, it's kind of sugar is going to go. So there's all sorts of things there. That's a bit of the exhibition, the interaction. And so when, I'll just show you one. So they're handed some beans here, and they choose. So this is so what we have to think about too is what's going to work in the gallery, in the museum in this case, real time. And in places like Columbia, this is a brand new museum, the internet was shot and go up, the electricity would turn off. And so what we have to figure out is what do we automate? And a lot of the times our intention for making this real time ends up being that we create an automated version. So anyway, one more. This is New York Electronic Arts Festival. Again, a similar thing we did on government islands. And then this is one of the last projects that larger projects that dealt with similar things. So, I'm not going to show you guys that, but this has, I'll just show you one system. So in a sense, this had a system that's designed and processing as well. That basically you go out on the water and you put an EEG headset on and you go into the water, and with a Raspberry Pi, we were logging sort of meditative states, and then basically in the gallery here, where I want to show you. So he's wearing a headset. So he gets in and he wears this headset. This is an installation, and he sits down. There was an original performance to go along with this, but basically he sits down. There's a processing sketch here that's measuring his EEG, and as he does that, when he reaches a meditative state, according to this technology, because this is also a technology that's very much consumer-based product. So according to this, when you reach a meditative state, it goes green, and then there's another element in this space. There's a printer, a thermal printer on the back of this piece that prints out the GPS coordinates of where they are when they're out in the water. In this case, this is printing out samples of when we were out in the water. So you can see how it's much in the printer, how it's printing. This whole project was related called Poseidon. It was a second iteration of a project called Poseidon's Pole. We were invited to make this work in Catholic Greece Academy and Cultural Center of the Arts. So basically going out on the water and using this EEG headset to record these gestures. So again, processing is embedded in most of our projects in some ways. You'll see I've done a lot of pieces with water and migration, and so you'll see the interfaces. Also collaborative projects, again, Science Center in Dublin and other interactivos for people getting together to do something about the environment. This piece was one last piece here. It's called Dispersants, 2010, and I want to show you because it's really interesting relationship to coding. But the idea was when the big oil spills happened, at that time the BPO disasters happened, there was all these beautiful images that were happening online, and we were watching, they're sort of helpless, watching these images of sort of this big eruption in the ocean. And so part of connecting with code is sometimes really interesting because you can kind of think about technology and these huge systems that are in place to drill oil and that, and then thinking about how do we fit in, where do we fit in, and how can we comment on that, or how can we kind of start to comprehend what's going on. So in this case, pretty interesting, where this was another, based on earlier experiments, using the camera to, again, pull in these images from Flickr at the time, and then as you would kind of move through the space, again, with the camera, with computer vision, you would start painting these pieces. And the idea is, when we think about these things, these catastrophes, maybe they're only abstract to us because we really don't have an idea of what these things really mean. So again, a lot of the time, my projects really stem from how we relate to the technology that's created at the time, and how we can kind of engage in different ways. So anyway, then you can see kind of some of the things we've written down here. I'll just give you a quick view of how this is running in real time. So it's also bringing in video. So I pre-found videos, and then it was bringing in images at the time. So you can see as you move through, you're sort of painting these spaces. This is done with a library called Hype. You can find it online. Hype is another library that allows you to kind of, it's kind of another layer that you can add on to processing. You can kind of see how that works. And all the graphics I created were pulling color from those images that were loading in, but also the graphics, you can see a lot of shells and type graphics there. So this is some video. I'm just going to leave it at that. Thank you so much. Again, thanks for having me. There will be a workshop.
Actually, I wanted to bring that up.
Okay.
Do we still have to contest?
Are you?
Perfect. Like, how's everyone else feeling about the workshop? Like, do you?
Yeah, we don't need to do it. It's up to you guys. I'm here. I'm okay. But again, it has been a long day. Some amazing talks and amazing workshops already. So we can call it. You don't need to do the workshop.
Anyone be terribly disappointed?
If you want, we're here. You can ask any questions. In fact, if you guys have any questions right now, we can talk about stuff. And if you have any directed questions about tech related to Arduino and math processing, yeah.
I've always got questions.
Yeah.
So it looks like most of the stuff you're using is free software, robotics cross-platform. Are these things that are useful as more closely to convenience, or do you see value inherently in software free and things?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, I think the value, again, I think when we were starting out, we were downloading versions of Flash and Corrector, anything we get our hands on, and not being able to afford it. So open source definitely helps, allows for access. Also, the community is really behind that. So all the communities, I mean, I've learned so much from just the books that are out there, the community, people that are really pushing the tutorials and things like that, really pushing it. Amazing coders as well. I really hope that at some point I'll be at a level where I can give back in that way. I do through workshops, but the online communities, the artists and coders and the technicians and everyone that's online is really contributing. That's how this happens. So I also find so at the institution, of course, there's always Adobe. So Adobe is one of those things that's an industry standard, and all institutions have to figure out how to pay for it. They're usually really expensive. and that. And I see Walla's Adobe saying, well, this is what we've got, and this is what we're going to. What I find is also interesting is that GitHub, or areas that were originally intended and still are, sort of platforms where people can share a lot of code. You go on GitHub and grab all sorts of things and mess around with them, and stuff like that. I find that then a system like Microsoft that buys GitHub, right? And so then there's all sorts of interesting processes. Is it now that they kind of understand that this experimental zone, now something that I create, I have no idea, again, it doesn't seem to have much value in the market, I don't think. But again, the way someone might see something I do is that I kind of am interested in sort of this abstract way of making change to the community in another way and build something else. So I see the value just in also what people generate. I don't know if that answered your question. Okay. What do you think?
I've been really interested in free software for a long time.
Yeah.
And I feel like free in some ways is dying in certain areas. But just to see all of these different free software projects at the end, that's really cool.
Yeah, I always feel that in processing these communities have a donation button, right, or Domino, and that, and so I'm bad at that. I've got to get better at donating. So, say a project like the project in Brazil that we did was a paid gig. Some of these projects are paid, especially the ones that are related to the Isaiah festivals, which is the International Symposium of Electronic Art, where I'm really embedded. I've done a lot of different projects. They've enabled me to go all over the place and do these projects, but a lot of the time you're not getting any either external funding or things like that. But say, for example, the iteration of Sonic Escape when we went to Brazil, they were able to give us the money, and then we, as a group, there was 3 of us, we said we have to donate a certain amount of money to Africa. We used these tools to create this, and it made some money. The first time, actually, where I could say, oh, wow. Although we would have done it anyway. If someone said, hey, do you want to go project on this massive, biggest screen in South America? I mean, so for us, it was just like, and you're going to pay us something? But I think giving back, and I think, I think as institutions, we're able to, and so I'm slowly having that discussion in my institution, saying, hey, he's part of the course being paid for to donate something back. It's important to keep the community, to keep going. P5 is amazing too. Both P5 and processing, you'll find that, I've been super excited because Bridget's like the first grad in a long time, and thanks to Casey and his workshop and teaching, that she's, really kind of going full force into, learning some of these interactive technologies, connect and things like that. So that's also propelling our community. This is propelling our community. These connections, these connections and community. That's all. Do you guys have any other questions?
Well, it's funny, I actually have a question for Kurt. Kurt, would you like to join us for dinner?
Sure.
Because I think we could cover everybody in this room.
Oh, awesome.
So one thing I might, I don't want to cut the Q&A short, but what I'd like to do is expand it or displace it. Or it's let's go find somewhere to eat. It's not much of a walk to go downtown where we have a number of restaurants. And it might be it's a little tougher to get spots for 10, but I think we can do it. So if, I'm trying to think whether I want to drop off my backpack or something at the art building before we head downtown, but does that sound good with everyone? Can we continue the conversation over dinner?
For sure. Cool, thank you. Let's do it.
Bye, Kristen.
Thank you, Kristen.
Yeah, so I was like so inspired by today.